Hey, fellow tennis nerds. I hope all is well. I'm here today with returning guest. He's been here, I don't know how many times, 4 or 5 maybe. We also talk on the side. He's one of my favorite guys to talk tennis to. Nikola Aracic from Intuitive Tennis. Check out his instructions. One of the best online you can find. A really nice guy too. And how are you today, Nikola?
I'm doing great. I want to make a quick correction. It's my third time on. I keep track.
Yes,
I'm
very good.
now I'm now even with Rick Macy. We're tied
Okay,
as
great.
the most appearances on the Tennis Nerd podcast.
It's very good. Very
But
good.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
de nada, de nada. No, I know. I talked to Rick the other day, and he wanted to come on again. So it's gonna be an arms race now. It's gonna be tough.
Okay.
That's great. It's great. So how you been doing? Like I've been following your series with the Felipe. Like it's been very very interesting. Like being a player that's kind of in the Felipe area of play. I think it's been very fascinating to follow his progress and see how he's improving slowly. Right.
Look, it's been something that I always wanted to do, and he came here for 10 days all the way from Brazil, and we played 5 hours a day. In
Wow.
addition to that, we did video analysis and stuff like that. So there was 50 plus hours. And it was very challenging to put it all together in video format because I had a tremendous amount of footage. But I wanted to show what it takes to get better at tennis is to do a lot of reps, but it's got to be the correct reps. So you got to do a lot of problem solving, technical corrections, and then do the reps. And this works. Tennis is all about hard work, and this is what I wanted to show. So there's two more episodes left, episode 11 and episode 12. And so far, people have liked the series. Some videos have been a little bit longer than others because they needed to be. I needed to show the process of improvement, and other videos have been a little bit shorter. So it was a lot of hard work. It's very hard work to watch the entire thing, but I think it's nice to see that if you put in the right type of work, you get good results.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear as well. Like, I mean, you really are so good at spotting some deficiency, like quite quickly. I can tell from the videos, even like that. You're like, okay, this is your problem on the forehand. This is what's happening, and then you have actually like a clear map of okay, this is number one priority to fix. And it seems to actually like you see him improving, right? Like we haven't watched the whole series yet, but it's pretty clear that with the hard work, and he seems to be a pretty dedicated guy. I mean, he came all the way, so he's ready to work. You can actually improve. Like it's just about putting in the time with a good coach.
So he definitely has improved, and I'm not going to give away the ending, but you can see that he's playing better than he did in the beginning. He was completely lost with this game. He is a player who started tennis later in life, and he was a professional soccer player, and he's very passionate about the game. He has his own court in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and he just wants to maximize his potential. He loves the game, has the passion for it, and that is the most important thing for anyone, to have the passion to want to do the work. And so when he showed up here, he was completely lost in what I call technique land, where he was making a lot of changes, drastic changes to his technique. For example, he considered, changing his grip on the forehand, which was semi-Western to Eastern. He was changing his take back, and he was doing all these changes, and his game just kept getting worse and worse. And he became very obsessive on the mistakes that he was making. It got into his head, in other words, and he was not enjoying playing tennis anymore. But on day 3 of our series, we had really a big breakthrough, where he found the passion for the game again. He became a fighter again, and he began to give it 100% on every ball. And you can see that when you watch the first episode, you can see that he's kind of sluggish and he's standing still and he's very negative. But then when you watch the later episodes, you'll see that he's fighting like crazy. He's grunting. A lot of people complain about the grunting, but to me, it's a positive sign of intensity and trying hard. If it's something that happens naturally, of course, you don't want to fake grunt ever. But if it's something that's happening naturally, it can be a positive sign. You can see that he found the passion again and the joy for the game, because all of a sudden his strokes were working and he was motivated to keep going. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. Now, when it comes to me spotting mistakes, it's just a lot of hard work as a coach that I've done over all these years, working with players of all levels, but especially with players at the recreational level. Because when I worked with my dad at TC Grünweiss Ahaus in Germany, he put me on a court at 13 years old to teach lessons, private lessons to adults. So while I do enjoy coaching players at the high level, I even coach some professional level players. My specialty, so to speak, like what I did the most in my coaching career is the recreational level. So when it comes to spotting mistakes that are done at the recreational level, I've just had a lot of experience and I've seen it all. Now, on top of that, since I started doing the online coaching, I've done a tremendous amount of video analysis of over the past 5 years. And so I've seen a lot of different mistakes. I have made videos about those mistakes, not necessarily on YouTube. I have done some of it on YouTube. It's kind of a tedious topic, so you can't do too many of those type of videos on YouTube. They're very dry. But on my website, there's a whole section of videos titled Problems at the Rec Level, where you can see the most common mistakes on the forehand, backhand, serve, and so on, and the solutions on how to fix them. So it's just been a lot of hard work and trying to find solutions for players at the rec level. So when you say I'm pretty good at spotting things, I've seen a lot of these mistakes from other players. So when I see something like that, I can spot it rather quickly because I've seen it before, and I've corrected it before on other players, and I try to correct it again with the same methods. That usually work. If they don't work, I try other things. And like I said, it's just been a lot of hard work working with players at the rec level. And the more I do it, the better I get at it regarding, spotting errors and correcting them.
Yeah, but it's like there's no shortcuts to anything, and it's the same for him. Like he wants to improve his game, you want to improve as a coach, like as well. So you've been putting in the work.
Yeah,
that's just there's no shortcuts. I think a lot of today what you're seeing is that people want, I get messages all the time like, oh, I want to be on your podcast. I want to do this. I have a tennis thing, because people want to take shortcuts, and you need to build your own skill set. You need to put in the hours. I don't think there's any shortcut to putting in the hours. It's like whatever, it's a job. Like I worked in marketing for 20 years,
Yeah.
It's like, that you're picking up skills as you go along, whatever you're doing. But when it comes to his game, like when he changed his mindset, was that something you had to kind of get out of him? Like in a way you talk to him, you're trying to inspire him, you try to get him to have more positive mindsets? Because, we all know that tennis can be kind of a dark place when you're playing badly. Like it can be really tough to get out of that.
So let me address both of the things that you said first. The whole thing about quick fixes or quick solutions or, wanting quick answers, that of course doesn't work, because the reality is that when I correct something, let's say on a forehand and that 1 hour lesson or in the 2 hour lesson, and then that same player goes to the match court, he's going to play exactly the same way that he was playing before that lesson. In other words, the forehand is not fixed. Okay. How is he going to fix his forehand, or how is she going to fix her forehand, is by repeating the new movement, whatever it may be, tens of thousands of times, so that it can be memorized in her system. It can, in other words, become automatic. And now it can be called off in a match without conscious thought, i.e. intuitively. That's really the only way it works. So it's identifying the problem and then doing it correctly many, 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 many times in a non-match situation. And that's how it works. So while there might be some things in tennis where the solution can happen rather quickly in one lesson, most things require time, patience. It also, of course, depends on the amount of muscle memory somebody has already stored. So if you're talking about a player that has had a waiter serve for 30 years, it's going to take a tremendous amount of work to get rid of that, as opposed to someone who maybe has had a waiter serve for a year or two. Is going to be less muscle memory there, so it's going to be easier. So you need to be patient and not look for quick fixes, because ultimately when you try the quick fix and you see it doesn't work, you're going to get down on yourself and there's going to be problems. Now, as far as, now remind me, what was the other thing you said?
No, his mindset changed. Like,
Okay,
was this
thank you.
something you had to push him out of,
Thank you.
or
Yeah, that was really huge. And unfortunately, we didn't have that captured on camera because I played a lot of sets with him because I wanted to test to see that where the technique is at, because we did a tremendous amount of repetitions, and then he would play sets with me and other players. And on this particular day, which was, I think, day 3 or 4, I think it's episode 4. I'm not 100% sure, but we played a match, and on this particular match, I was not mic'd. And you couldn't hear our conversations on camera, unfortunately. But when he got down 4-1 in the first set, and I saw him kind of just playing in a way where it didn't look like he was having fun. There was some sluggishness to his movements between the points, that he was hanging his head, and even between the points, he was on his heels a lot. And he was just not playing inspired tennis. There was a lack of intensity, a lack of electricity. And so I had a long talk with him on a changeover at that 4-1. And I told him exactly what I just said. And I explained to him that without this intensity, he will not be able to improve his game. And without trying his hardest on every single ball, what he's learning is going to be impossible, because the facts are that footwork in tennis and intensity in tennis is the most important thing. Why? Because let's say you have the absolute perfect technique, you've learned it, right? And you've done it from a stationary position possibly, or from easy situations. And now you step on a court and you don't move. What's going to happen is you're going to be forced to improvise, and your technique that you have, you won't be able to access it. You're going to lose it. And so that's what was happening to Felipe because of this lack of intensity. Why exactly this was happening early, it's not clear, but my guess was that he was so negative about his game. He was in a bad mood, because intensity sometimes in tennis can relate to happiness and a good mood, right? So when you're happy, when you're in a good mood, when you're positive, you're more likely to be bouncing around and moving. So after that long talk that we had, right away, he started bouncing around. Like I said before, he started grunting more. He was on his toes. Now, interestingly, he also started getting more angry. Now, a lot of people will say that, you should try to behave on the court, which I 100% agree with. You shouldn't throw your racket. I agree 100%. But with some players, when I see anger outbursts or screaming and stuff like that, on some players, this can be a positive sign that they're engaged in the match, and that the intensity is there, and that the willingness to fight is there. And that's what I saw from Felipe after he was down 4-1 in that first set. All of a sudden, something clicked. And yes, he was screaming out there, and he was really engaged in the match. But we talked afterwards at lunch, and he said, I'm back. I'm back. Now I can play. Now I can fight again. And then throughout this whole week, we remembered this particular day, that particular moment, as the most crucial moment in the entire 10-day training block, because that moment made all the technical changes possible, because now he was a lot more engaged. He was positive. He was moving his feet. There was electricity there, and he played a lot better from that moment on.
Yeah, I think sometimes there has to be like a moment of self-reflection, whether that's a talk through
Yeah.
you, like that you actually enable him to see what he's doing, because you can feel it yourself. If you're not energized on the court, whether it's a match or a training,
Yes.
you're not really getting anything out of it. Like, you're just like there going through the motions, being very passive. You're going to play shit tennis. There's no chance you're going to play good tennis. Like, it's impossible without intensity, right?
Absolutely. Now, let me give you one example of somebody that everybody knows, and that's Djokovic. So if you just picture Djokovic losing one of these weird matches that he sometimes loses, even against De Minaur recently, but just picture one of these Djokovic losses where he inexplicably loses in straight sets to someone that's ranked below him. And what's a common theme in these matches is a completely flat emotional state of Djokovic. There's no screaming. There are no anger outbursts. And he's just completely flat. But when he's playing his best and he's engaged, there's everything. There's screaming, come on. There's even anger, and he's just more in the match, mentally engaged. And a lot of players are like this too. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. Everybody's going to have a different, you know, personality when it comes to the tennis court. But you could say that generally, a lot of players, you see signs like this. They can be very positive signs. When somebody's in the match, trying their best, and when you see somebody like just going through the motions, you know, just kind of flat out there, that's generally a bad sign. Now, there are some players who just have personalities like that, and that's how they always play. That's different, but those players are in a minority. So, you know, I've said this so many times on my videos that how important intensity is, how important electricity is, and footwork, and that's definitely related to your mental state, which has to be one where you are trying your absolute best on every single shot, every single point.
Yeah, I think a common thing that, I mean, I've experienced that, I think I've heard other people as well, is that you're worried sometimes that if you put in your best and you still lose, it's going to hurt even more, right? So I think that's something where you almost protect your own ego. Like, if I don't give everything, I'm thinking Kyrgios in many ways here as a typical example.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't give his best, but generally we've seen situations where he doesn't, you know, that's an example. But when you give your best, even as a kind of rec competitive player, I play an open, whatever, if I give everything I have and I lose, I feel like I should feel great, but there's also a worry that you will feel like, yeah, I'm not better than this, you know what I mean? Have you noticed this?
Well, I think that's an extreme example. When you talk about Kyrgios or Tomic, players that have tanked matches, because that's an obvious thing. What I'm talking about is more subtle than that, because when a player is kind of flat in their emotional state and not necessarily trying 100%, it's hard because it appears that they are, but there are small little things that are holding them back. So increasing that intensity is maybe not going to be as obvious. Maybe it's like 1 to 5% increase in fighting and trying harder, and now it's a whole different player. So, of course, when somebody doesn't want to be out there and can't be bothered and is not fighting and not trying, like Kyrgios or Tomic, that's an extreme example. Of course, that that there's going to be only one outcome, and that's going to be you getting off the court in less than an hour and losing. But it's of course easier said than done. To give it your absolute best, it's very much a cliche thing. It's a lot more complex than that. But when you can find that, where you are trying your absolute best and give it your all out there, that's truly the only way to maximize your potential.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I feel like there's in tennis, because tennis scoring system is so unique in a way. It's like you can start the match in a bad mood and you go down love 3.
Right.
And then you maybe win one game, even if it's you hold your serve, and suddenly something clicks and you want a bit more, right? Like it could be a micro moment in a match where you just like you had two personalities in one set. That's the thing in tennis. It's like so moody,
Of course. It's a roller coaster, It's momentum shift. That's what's so tough about it. The scoring system makes everything a lot more difficult because certain score lines are going to evoke different things inside of you, different emotions, and to be able to deal with that, you're going to go through ups and downs, and you just got to stick with it. But yeah, it's absolutely true that you can go from playing your absolute worst tennis and being in a horrible state of mind to playing your absolute best tennis, and something just clicks all of a sudden. Or it can go the other way, where you're playing your best and then something clicks, goes the other way, and now you're playing your worst. So it can go both ways. That's what makes tennis so tricky,
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, the mental part is so important when it comes to, like, you work with so many rec players, like mental versus technical. Like we all have technical deficiencies, but I feel like many are also struggling purely mentally. Like they would increase their match wins by 50% just by some mental tweaks or mindset changes or intensity changes,
Yes, I do think if you want to say that intensity is a mental thing, I agree with you 100%. But especially at the lower recreational levels, it's purely a skill-based game, and the mental part, it doesn't really matter as much. when you get towards the higher recreational levels, then of course it matters a lot. When the technique is better, when all the fundamentals are there, when the skills are better now, and when players are more equal in that regard, now it's going to come down to more of the mental game. And of course, when you look at players at the elite level, I mean, we've talked about this many times. You take a guy who's ranked, or let's just say you watch a futures final between two guys, and these guys, the way they're playing, they could easily be playing a 250, right? Like there's no difference. These guys are playing amazing. They're serving huge. They're unbelievably fit. They're ripping forehands, ripping backhands. It's going to be impossible to detect a difference in skill. And if you think that you can detect a difference in skill, you're a liar, because there is not much difference in skill between that level and the level of the 250s, right? So when the skill level is even, it's got to come down to more of the intangible factors and the mental game, so to speak. So the simple formula is that the better the skill level, the more important the mental game is. The lesser the skill level, the less important the mental game is. Because if someone doesn't have a technique and is going to make a forehand or a backhand mistake on the second or third ball in every rally, or it's going to double fault, it's going to be irrelevant regarding the mental game. It's purely a technical problem.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's obviously like the better you get, then other factors come into play, of course.
Now, just can lower recreational players or intermediates get nervous when they play matches? Yeah, absolutely. And they can get tight and all that and start pushing and start double faulting. That can happen too. But it's going to be less of a factor than technical deficiencies, because when you have players competing against each other at the lower recreational levels with vast differences in skill, the player with the best skill set is always going to win, irrelevant of their fitness or their mental strength or anything like that. So the skill, in other words, the technique, is the most important thing at those lower recreational levels. Learning that is priority.
Do you mean technique also as like footwork, like in running? Because sometimes you see like on like levels like where you get like an athlete who's new to tennis. He's like played tennis 2 years, and you have a guy who's not an athlete, but he's played tennis 6 years. But the ex-footballer, he's running down every point, although his strokes are not so developed, and he wins because he's just better athlete, right? He's just better physically prepared for the match.
Okay, can you repeat that again? So you're talking about somebody that used to play professional sports, is a great athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
That person's going to win against who?
Like an intermediate tennis player, like who maybe is a little bit more technically developed in tennis, but is not as athletic in ability in terms of just running down balls all the time.
I don't think so. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it matters that much. I mean, of course, it depends on what level we're talking about. So if we're talking about more the advanced recreational level,
I would say 4-0, right? Let's say 4-0, 4-5, or something like that.
I don't think it matters so much, because let's just say that you play against the absolute nightmare of every 4-0, which is somebody that's a dinker or a slicer or a pusher, or, that in itself will be something that's hard to overcome when you don't have proper technique. That's going to be very difficult. So your athleticism is not going to help you much there. If somebody dinks you a ball half court and you have technical deficiencies, now this ball doesn't have any pace, it's short, and you don't have technique. So what you usually see is that players either dink the ball back and they try to go for it, and when they dink the ball back, they're in these endless dink rallies and they go crazy, or they go for it and they make mistakes and end up beating themselves. So again, athleticism in those lower recreational levels is not going to be as much of a factor as the skill level. Now, interestingly, you mentioned pro players. I don't know if you ever saw Dwayne Wade take a lesson, and he was hitting backhands. It was on Instagram. This is going back a few months. And Dwayne Wade is an unbelievable athlete, right? But you asked me a while back whether footwork is something that you have to learn. You absolutely do. There are footwork fundamentals in tennis, and when you watch this clip of Dwayne Wade, it's going to be hard to find now, but you'll see that he doesn't have any tennis footwork. He has more like basketball footwork, and it's influencing his strokes in a very negative way, and is not able to hit the ball cleanly. So, yes, when I talk about skill, it's not only your technique, your strokes, it's also your footwork. You need to learn how to move on a tennis court properly.
Yeah, and weight transfer and kinetic chain and stuff. Tennis is one of the most difficult sports. I've seen, like, there was an Instagram account that got some traction now because there was one guy who was ex player of football, I think football player, that has gone into tennis, played it only for like 2 years or
You talk about
something like that.
Ochocinco? Ochocinco?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember the handle, but it got like a lot of traction on Instagram as like a thing where he makes kind of like a tribute video to tennis, like how difficult tennis is. Like which is what all tennis players love to hear, because it's a nightmare sport sometimes.
Listen, I would never call it a nightmare sport, but it can be a nightmare if you're doing it the wrong way. You know, it can turn into a nightmare, but it's a beautiful thing when you put a lot of work into something and you get the results from it, and you get the results from it that will last you a lifetime, right? So let's just say that you do a tremendous amount of work, like, for example, Felipe has been doing all these years, and now you get yourself to be a 4.5 level player. You're going to be 4.5 level for a long time before you get old and you can't move anymore. So you're going to earn this level and you're going to keep it, and you're going to be proud of yourself. So I would say that tennis requires a lot of patience, but it's a very rewarding game. If you put in the right type of work, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, 100%. No, like it also gets more and more fun the better you get, right? So
Absolutely.
the more you play, that's why the addictive part of it, I think, is that partly just hitting balls is very addictive. It's such a nice feeling just to hit a good shot and have someone you're in a rhythm with. But as you improve, like yesterday, me and Daniel, who you know a little bit, Rutkowski, we were just doing drills yesterday, like a lot of drills, short balls, doing different kinds of movement drills, just like very intense, and 90 minutes training. Like both of us were like, our legs were feeling it, heavy. But afterwards, you feel great. Like it was just like, okay, yeah, I felt like I improved this shot, and then it was just like, even if we didn't play any points, we just did drills for like 90 minutes. It was just like super fun. We both leave with a smile, right? So it's a good feeling.
I think it's phenomenal. And in episode 12, the final episode with Felipe, I talk about at the end how fun tennis is. And to me, the most fun thing about tennis is the competition part, because this is where it's like a gamble, because you don't know how you're going to feel afterwards. So there's going to be an outcome one way or another. And you're either going to be on cloud nine or you're going to be absolutely distraught. And I feel like that part can be extremely addicting. Getting addicted to chasing that feeling of beating someone that's at your level or slightly better. A very tense match where you were nervous before and then you come through it, you end up winning. You feel good afterwards, and that feeling can be addicting. And that's what I personally love about it the most, because I think hitting balls sometimes, it's got to be the right person who enjoys that. I do enjoy it too, but I know some players who don't like it so much. I'm sure that you've ran into players who don't like warming up. They just want to like do a 2-3 minute warm up and start playing right away, right? So there are players like that who really don't want to do that and just play. And then, of course, there's players who only hit balls, and that's the thing that I enjoy the most. I'm more the guy who doesn't like warming up. Warming up gets on my nerves. The warm up, I will take like 3-4 volleys, 2 overheads. I'll take 3 serves, which I don't recommend. That's how you blow out your shoulder. But I just want to go. I want to play, because to me that is the most fun thing about tennis is the competition part.
Well, I can agree in a way. I think some days you like yesterday we did that. The day before we played some points and stuff like it's just a mix. But like the competition part, when I feel like the most fun is actually when you play tournaments. That's just where I think it's the most fun. Like when you actually have something. I mean, practice matches they're very fun too. Yeah. But like a tournament, you really feel there's a lot on the line, and mentally mainly. It's not money, prize money, whatever. Yes. But it's like this. You have that drive home, like you play an open, you drive home, you win a 3-setter that takes 2.5 hours, or you lose that one, the last tiebreak. It's a very different drive home. You have when you're in the car.
True.
Right?
True. So like there's going to be different personalities, and everybody's going to be a little bit different regarding that. There's some players who don't place as much value on a practice set or a practice match, and they placed a lot of value on tournament matches. So it is true that I've seen super, super high level players who play horrible in practice. They don't care. And then they go to a tournament and they play unbelievable, right? So that's definitely true that there is players like that. But I'm more of a player who, for me, it doesn't matter if I'm playing a practice set on court number 16 with nobody watching, or if I'm playing at a tournament with maybe 50 people there. They're watching in a tournament. So to me, it doesn't matter, because I got to answer to myself. And whether I lose that practice match on court 16 or I lose the tournament match, I feel the same afterwards, which is awful. I'm in a bad mood. So to me, I can't accept losing in a way, regardless of the circumstance, whether it's a practice match or a tournament match. But other people can. They're more flexible that way. They might be even more willing to experiment in practice matches and maybe try different things. Maybe they're a baseliner, and then when they practice, they're going to maybe serve and volley a little bit more, and maybe that's going to be a positive thing to their game. But personally, to me, it's like I'm a super competitive guy, and I need to, when I'm playing, I need to like try my best, and I need to try to win, or I know that if I lose afterwards, I'm going to be like, asking myself some tough questions.
Yeah, it's an interesting how different. Like I'm the more the like if I play a tournament, I would be a little bit more like, okay, this is serious. But if I play like a league match or at practice, I bring 6 different rackets. I play first set, I play with this one, I test it, and then I do serve and volley with this one. I don't really care that much, but it's a part of it. But then if I play a tournament match, I can be a little bit more like, then I'm get pissed with myself if I underperform.
Right.
Like, I get really like, yeah, it's
okay,
weird.
but that's more work for you, though. Don't you think that's more like your work creeping into your pleasure with the rackets and testing? Yeah, because you do this professionally. So that's completely different in that regard, because I generally don't recommend players having like 4 or 5 different type of rackets in their bag.
No.
I don't think this is good. There has been some players who have had different rackets for the return game and the serve game. Are you aware of this?
Chrissy,
yeah. So there was one guy called Juan Balcells. Remember him?
As well? Okay, yeah.
He had a different racket for serve and a return game. He would put it, towards the back of the court. And there was also a doubles player. I think his name is Martin. Is it Fabrice Martin? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if he's still a French guy. He had a Babolat Pure drive for the serve game. He had a Babolat Pure arrow for the return game.
No. Wow, that bad?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my! Cressy, right? He has 2 different specifications.
Who is this?
Maxime Cressy. He was.
Maxime Cressy. Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Cressy is the French way, I guess, because he's French, but he's now playing for the US, so it's Cressy.
No, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, but he always leaves a racket on the back, and I thought it was different string tensions, because that would make sense in my head. Like if you have a little bit different tension on the serve, you get a bit more on the serve, but it was actually 2 different weights.
Oh, so really?
Yeah.
With same racket though.
Yeah. Same. He had an Aero 2016, but he had them they a little bit differently customized for his serving. So always 2 rackets, so always one in the back. It looks weird, very strange, but it
does. Okay. So, I mean that it makes a lot of sense to do that. It makes a lot of sense. So. But I think, see what happens to a lot of rec players. I've seen this because I look in their bags and I see what they bring to the court, and it's like 3 completely different rackets. Like there's no rhyme or reason to them. You know what I mean? And then now they're switching between one and the other, and I got to tell them like which one works the best for them, and it's usually the one that they've been playing with the longest. So that is not a good thing to do. When you have multiple rackets and you're swapping them out senselessly.
I think like I've had a negative impact on the tennis world in many ways, because I think it's like a lot of people are like, oh, I love bringing 5 rackets, 4 rackets, or 3 rackets, and I know how bad it is. Like I know how like yesterday I brought like 7 rackets because we were just practicing, because I had a lot of rackets to test. There's new speeds, new pure strikes, new blades, new percepts, new everything. Like and it's my life. It's strange. It's not normal, right? But I took 1 racket that I played the last tournament with. And I was like, okay, I feel great with this racket. So I didn't even touch the other rackets for the whole session, because I didn't want to ruin that. Because I know if I start, it's going to go. Like my feeling of when I was striking the ball well.
And which racket was this? Which racket was this that was feeling the best?
it wasn't a Prokenix, 100 square inch Prokenix.
Of
Really
course,
ugly
the
racket.
Prokenix. This is your
Yeah,
racket. Do you understand?
yeah,
This
maybe.
is
I don't
your
know.
racket. Every time I asked you, what's the best racket, you always say Prokenix. This is
Yeah,
your brand.
it's weird. It's very strange, but it's like it was the one I like. Okay, I felt I don't want to keep switching around now because we did that the other day when you had Hachanav's racket and we had the Steams and we had like so
Okay.
me and Daniel both tried different rackets, you know.
Now,
But
is it a
it's like,
is it a current Prokenix model or is it an older one?
no, it's a current one. You can get it now, right?
What's the name of it?
It's a very bad name. Prokenix KIQ Plus 5 Pro.
That is fantastic. That's why I love Prokenix. You know, I used to be
Yeah.
sponsored by them when I was in juniors. I played with the Prokenix S Asymmetric, which is a weird racket. Do you know this one?
No, no,
No?
no.
Asymmetric. So the frame was asymmetrical, right? So you had the frame, right? So it was thin on this one side and thick on the other.
Oh
And
my
then
god, I
the
never
opposite
seen this.
the opposite on top. Thick on top. You want to see it? I can bring it. Hang on one
Yeah,
second.
yeah, awesome.
All right,
This is
I'll show
great,
it to
you
you.
know.
I'll show it to you. Hold on.
This has to be I have to see this.
Now you're going to see the greatest Prokenix rackets in history. So look at the bottom here. You see this?
Wow.
And look
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
top here. It's like thick
Uh-huh.
here, thin here. Okay. And now
Yeah.
I'll flip it around, and now it's the opposite. It's thick on the bottom, thin on top.
But what's the? I mean, that looks almost
It's-
impossible. It looks like an optical illusion to me.
It's asymmetric, man. It's asymmetric. One of the
What does
greatest.
it do? Is it like aerodynamic?
One of the greatest rackets in history. I'll be honest with you, it makes no sense, and I don't know what it's supposed to do. But back in the day, this racket like was amazing because I used to play with a Prince graphite, and then I switched to I think Prince Precision, the Capriati one. Remember this one?
Yeah.
It had one of those like things in the middle,
Yeah.
like a dampener that came inside the racket, almost like a
Not
plastic.
the stabilization bar. Like
The stabilization bar, not
Right.
this one here, but they had something here
Mhm.
made out of like plastic. You could see the strings through, it was see through.
yeah.
And then my dad got me a deal with Prokenix, and I played with different ones, and I'm finally settling on this one. And I don't think it was this particular one; it was a blue one. And I always loved like super responsive rackets, like super high power, low control rackets, and it just suited me perfectly. And then from the Prokenix, I was so used to that feel. That's when I started playing with Wilson Hammer line, with a bunch of different rackets from the Hammer line before finally settling on the Wilson Hyper Hammer 5.2, which is the racket I played with for like 15 years.
Yeah, good. You got good muscle memory. Like that's not what I'm getting, but yeah. So this was the one. I've got some other ones here, but
Let me
this was
see.
the
I've seen that one.
It's
Is that-
very ugly, I must say. Sorry, Prokenix, but this like what is this racing car driver design? It's not me.
And it feels good. You love that racket, huh?
It's good. It's actually very good. Like I think it's pretty responsive. It's also more forgiving. So I used to play with control rackets. This is 100 square inches.
Got
But
it.
it's 1620, so it's a bit more controlled, right?
Okay.
So you don't.
1620.
Yeah, I think
What's
that's
the-
good.
What's the
It's a
RE?
good- 66, 65, something.
It's a little stiffer.
Yeah,
And what's the balance? Is it head heavy?
it's pretty headlight, but this is 315 grams unstrung,
so,
right?
so it's a little bit heavier.
It's a bit heavier,
just
but
a tad heavier.
like, if you balance it, I think I matched them, so I added some weight. But if you balance it, you don't see it here, but
Got it.
like it's quite headlight, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Handle heavy.
It looks like there's nice specs. It looks like a nice racket. But I wanted to tell you.
I must say it's very good. But the thing is, like, I had this discussion the other day. Now we're in the racket topic. Maybe don't stay here
Yeah.
forever. But it's like I published a review about the Percept 97D, which is
Right.
320 gram. And sorry for people who are only thinking ounces, but they are on the website. You can check it out.
Yeah.
320 gram, 1820, 97 square inch racket. So this is a
Okay.
very demanding, high level racket. Both
It's,
both
Okay.
Daniel and I play with it. Daniel, he plays with a customized Pure Aero VS. You know, he's a good player. He's a better player than I am.
okay.
But we practice and we have a lot of fun on the tennis court. And he said also, like, this is a racket he used to like, but he said he doesn't get enough power. Like, he plays, like, you know, high upper leagues in Germany and stuff like this. He does compete, you know, and he said he cannot get enough, you know. On clay, it's like it's a nightmare. I did the review. I said, okay, it's demanding racket. I think it's for very advanced players. I cannot bring my best tennis. I need a bit more forgiveness from the racket, because when someone who hits hard pushes me in the corners, I don't have enough on the ball. Like, my ball is going to go short. and I'm dead meat every time, and my serve is not going to have the same pop as it has maybe with the Pro Kenix or something, right? So, but then people get pissed off because they feel like, oh, but this is a classic traditional racket. Like everybody, if you can't play with this, you're not a player. And I'm like, I'm just telling you that your tennis is most likely going to be better with an easier racket. This is just my opinion, But everybody gets very frustrated when I talk about tough rackets to use for players. They don't like using words like advanced, saying it's demanding. That's for tennis. Many tennis nerds, they don't like this language. It's funny how it is.
Jonas, first of all, you said earlier that you're doing a disservice to players by having so many rackets on the court, which is part of your job.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that this is completely relating to what you just said. I recently made 2 tennis racket videos for my channel, and I had to do some research on models that are discontinued, and it was very hard to find the racket specs. So I typed in the particular racket's specs on Google, and guess who popped up among one of the first searches? It was the Tennis Nerd website, and I couldn't tell you how many times this happened. And you provide such a great service. You go on the Tennis Nerd website and you find out information that is so difficult to get elsewhere. You can't get it, and you put in so much work, so you do a tremendous job. It's a tremendous value for the tennis community. Now, this, interestingly, these 2 videos, not both of them, but especially one of them, had to do with the exact topic that you just mentioned, which is racket weight. And I don't want to give too much away from this video, but the title is Exposing Tennis Warehouse. I'm not going to go any further. That's the title. Now, you can watch this video on intuitivetennis.com. It's already uploaded there, but it's going to come out on YouTube early in February, I believe. But I want to give you a scenario that's going to make a lot of sense regarding heavy rackets and the recreational level. So let's say that the force that you put into the ball is fixed. In other words, the racket will not swing by itself. The arm has to swing the racket. Is that a correct statement? Yes. If I put the racket like this, will it swing on its own without me propelling it to a certain direction? No. It won't, right? So what happens is the following. When the movement of the arm is fixed, now this is going to be a hard thing to do in real life because it's hard to repeat the exact movement 2 times, right? But let's just assume that the force that you put with your arm is fixed. When you have a heavy racket versus a light racket, there's going to be a deceleration. So the heavier the racket, the more the racket will decelerate. Now, people are going to be so upset at this statement, but this is hardcore facts. When you have like 2 cars racing each other, and it's exactly the same engine, same everything. One car is 5 tons, the other car is 4 tons. Which one's going to go slower? Everybody knows it's going to be the heavier one, right? Yeah. So it's the same thing with rackets. Why don't people understand this? So the reason why professional level players play with heavier rackets is that when they have a lighter racket, they are so strong, they swing so fast, they're such good athletes, is that a light racket will flail in the air too much and there won't be enough stability. So the mass provides stability, and more importantly, they are good enough to swing the racket fast consistently despite the racket being extremely heavy. So when it comes to the recreational level, there are a multitude of factors why this is not a good idea. Now, before I say why it's not a good idea, I'm going to say that there are some recreational players who can pull this off. Again, this depends on many variables too, but I will say that I'm not making an absolute statement. There's going to be some players who can play with heavy rackets, but generally speaking, when a player swings a heavier racket, they're going to require more athleticism to do so. Now, if they don't have that athleticism, they're going to feel a discomfort. And it's not going to be, like you said, an easy racket to play with. It's going to be a discomfort. It's going to feel like the racket is dragging through the air, and it's going to be pretty much a nightmare to play with a racket like that. I'll give you an extreme scenario. Let's take a 12-year-old or an 80-year-old, when you give them a RF 97 that's 340 grams unstrung, and they're going to have a hard time because they don't have the athletic capabilities to handle such a racket. Now, a lot of the people that are very active in tennis equipment videos, they will say the exact opposite of what I just said. They will say that a heavy racket will go through the air faster, and there's the exact opposite of what I just said. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that it's very simple. And I do go into this in great depth in my upcoming video, but they want to play with the exact racket that the pros are using on TV. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think there might be a macho element involved. Like I feel like the comments on some videos, when I try to help people, like, because I know so many players that are recreational players. Because if you look at how tennis changed also in equipment, it's like used to be very heavy, small head sizes. Everybody play with multi-filaments or gut strings. Now we have polyester strings that give you extra control. We have more large head size rackets with different types of string patterns to give you control. You can string polys lower and you still have good pocketing and control. So the equipment has changed quite a bit. Game has also changed. There's a lot more different techniques that adds a lot more topspin to the ball and so on.
Yeah.
And some players who realize this, they go to a slightly lighter racket, a little bit bigger head size. And most comments I get then on the channel is like, okay, I improved so much when I realized like I can't play with this. Then sometimes the weaker players that are maybe quite new, like played 2 years, they like, but I play now with the Percept 97 and it's much better racket for me, because they like the feeling also of using more advanced racket, because like you're with an iPhone Pro now, it's much better.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And that's the problem. Is also sometimes I feel like if you can't generate enough topspin to control the ball because you have quite like a flat swing or something is off with the swing, then the smaller head size will make less balls go out. Because you don't control it with spin, So
go ahead. So first of all, when you have a racket that's too heavy, so you're gonna have to exert more force to hit the ball at the same speed as before, because that racket is going to not accelerate more; it's going to decelerate more. Like that would be the example of the two cars. So what happens is when you are forced to swing faster and harder, your swing is going to become more inconsistent, and you're going to make a tremendous amount of mistakes. So what I look at with rackets and players is, of course, I want them to play pain-free. And I can't see necessarily whether they're in pain or not. So this is something that goes on inside of a player. And I just go with what they tell me. If they tell me they don't experience pain, I'll take them for their word. And I never, ever will make them change rackets or anything, even if they're playing with a racket that's extremely heavy. Because like I said, some players will be able to pull off heavy rackets. But more importantly, I can see differences in the way they play depending on the equipment that they're using, rackets and strings. I can definitely see. And that's something that I often have done where players have demos, 3 or 4 demos, and I tell them, listen, we're going to play 5 minutes with each one, and I'm just going to rally with you and observe you, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on. Then I pull them in, I give them some volleys, give them some overheads, I let them hit some serves. And I can usually tell which racket is going to be best for them. I can usually tell.
Yeah, I think this is something I've done for many years as well. Like let's say I bring 8 rackets, 6 rackets. Playing with players of different caliber. Sometimes there's like, my mother, father, they're intermediate father, beginner mother. Sometimes it's guys on my level, sometimes the guys on an even higher level.
Yes.
And I always try to pass around rackets to learn more and say, hey, play with this, see what happens, and from beginner up to the pro level, like to pretty serious pros. And you see a different output on the ball, you see a different stroke.
Yes.
I also talk to them afterwards, and also sometimes the perceptions are surprising. Like, okay, one guy who plays pretty high level, he says, okay, this racket feels stiff because it's an 1820 98 square inch racket, thin beam, very difficult to generate any power. He plays with a lot of topspin. He's like, yeah, it's a stiff racket, but he plays with a pure arrow, for example. That's technically stiffer, but it's just that the string bed is so dense that the racket strings bed stiffness is high, right? Like when you have Khachanov's racket here, we tried it yesterday.
Yeah.
It's an H22. This is a very difficult racket to use because 1820, 98, and small sweet spot. I mean, for Khachanov, he has fantastic technique,
What's the weight?
It's around 340 grams.
Right. So it's
and
pretty common.
336 swing weight.
So it's pretty common among the pros, that weight. And do you know what the balance is?
I haven't checked the balance. I will check it,
Okay.
but it's about even balance. I think. Well, a little bit
Even,
like
yeah.
maybe 2 points headlight, something like that.
Yeah. So that's going to be a racket that requires a lot of athleticism, to work for a player, generally speaking. I think the only exception would be, and there are some players like that who have always used heavy rackets. Maybe they came from the wooden racket era and they've always used heavy rackets. And when they pick up a light racket, it just feels like a feather to them and they can't play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty common, actually. Yeah.
It can happen a lot. So these players, they can handle a racket like that quite well. But I'm talking more about the general, because those players are in the minority. I'm talking about more the general public.
Yeah.
Your typical rec player will have a really difficult time playing with a racket like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think there's so many shades in between. So what my point of that video was, nowadays, even if you're a player who you hit flatter, you want more control, you don't put a lot of spin on the ball, you can still get like a dense pattern, 100 or even slightly larger head size even. That we talked about the WTA before we started. The steam, because you can see it's a steam because there's white grommets here, right? So there's 4 white grommets. This is a telltale. Yes. I think they're gonna stop doing them white, so people will see that it's a pro player.
You see that? See the bottom there where your finger is? Put the racket up a little higher.
Quite wide.
You see how much wider that is? That's how I knew that.
Finger in here.
Yeah, the actual blade, which is what that's supposed to be, the actual blade has a much thinner area there. And when
this is more like a blade-ish racket. You
see the blade, how much you see how much thinner is the thing?
Yeah.
So when all those WTA players supposedly switched from the steam to the burn, like Halep, Svitolina, countless of players, I was looking close to the racket. We talked about this before we got on, and I noticed that there was actually the steam. So this is what I don't understand with Wilson, why they get rid of popular lines of rackets like the steam. That steam, and add a steam S version. Remember that one?
Yeah.
With the super wide space between the strings. Like, there was such a popular racket. I don't understand why they got rid of it. But just one more thing on the topic of recreational players and rackets. So what I was talking about before, where I go on the court and I can see that one racket is the racket that suits the player best. I can see that there's an ease of play. The strokes are looking better. They're able to execute the technique more consistently and more cleanly. So this is where a channel like yours is so beneficial, because it's going to help players to find the proper racket. And what I keep saying is, like, you just got to demo as much as possible, and you will find it. You will find it. Don't go blindly on the internet and just start looking at what looks cool and what this player is playing with, because as I learned on the Tennis Nerd website, none of the players play with what you think they're playing with, right? So you just put up Kachanov's racket. It's not even the blade. It's a H22, right? So what you're trying to do by selecting a racket that your favorite player is playing with, they're not even playing with that racket. So you got a demo, and you're going to find a racket that works best for you. And now what I say goes completely against, marketing and all that, because I say that when you find a racket that suits you best, you just stick with it forever, and that can be a challenge too, because rackets get discontinued so fast. I talked about the steam being taken off the market inexplicably so, and replaced by the burn many years ago. So players sometimes are forced to switch rackets, So what I've personally try to do is get as many as possible of places like eBay and stuff, and just stock up on them. But there's really, when you find a racket that suits you, there's really no reason to switch. You're only going to make complications. Possible tennis elbow, possibly playing worse. But some players, I think they're more looking towards a racket to be the game changer, and it's generally not at the rec level. It's not going to make that much of a difference. But yeah, I mean, it goes against marketing. I know that, but as I said many times, like, try to avoid changing rackets unless you have to.
Yeah, it's crazy how the kind of deadline. I mean, now they release rackets like within 2 years, some brands, 3 years, other brands. Now we had the Pure Strike from Babola that took actually 5 years due to COVID and whatnot, But overall, like I always said, like, if you can play with a racket for 10, 15 years, I mean, I'm sure you're gonna play, like you said, better tennis, and you're gonna also have like a peace of mind, because I think a lot of players, now that I deal with some pros and follow the pro tour relatively closely, especially with gear, is that you see as soon as they start to switch and tinker around, they can enter quite a dark period, right? Because if your livelihood is winning tennis matches, and you're like, oh, today I've played with this string for a month, it might not even be enough for the muscle memory. Like, I mean, okay, a string you can maybe pull off, but like some guys, like it took Federer a year to change a racket before he had any results that was worth mentioning. So it's like,
Yes.
on the muscle memory should not be, and like you said, like they have millions of hours with this, like with that racket, so for them it's even worse. But if you play with a racket 5-10 years, this racket is a part of your arm now, so if you change it, suddenly your arm is different now. So you
Listen,
have to.
it's so complex the way your hand, most importantly, and your whole body gets used to certain equipment. You're not even aware that it's taking place, by the way. So I don't know if you noticed, but I've been giving some lessons with the Gamma RZR Baba
Yeah,
117. You saw this?
yeah, yeah.
And people are going insane. Like, there's like, why are you playing with that? That's 250 grams, right? But it's really nice to feed.
50 grams. I didn't know those that light.
Yeah, because that's not the real Baba. The real Baba is 137.
Yeah, I know
This
that
is
one. Yeah, I do know this is the Baba Light, kind of. Yeah, it's the smaller
this is
one.
the
Yeah.
Baba Light,
Mm.
which is lighter. I think the real Baba is like maybe around 270 or 280.
That's 29 inches, right? The big one, right? It's 29 inches, I
I
think.
think it's 29. Which one? The big one?
Yeah,
I
the
think it's. I
137.
think it's. I think
That's
it's
really long and big.
It's 29 inches and 137 square inch racket head. It's
crazy.
insane. It's insane. But yeah. Anyway, so this is so weird. But this is tennis, okay? So I've been giving a ton of lessons and actually playing with that racket, and I even play against a really good player because that player insisted on playing a set after our practice, and so when I then switched to my regular racket, which is around 300 grams, I could not get the ball past the service line. Okay, I felt like I was swinging like the Wawrinka racket, whatever that's called. I could not get any depth. I couldn't get the ball past the service line. I was like, oh my goodness, like I ruined myself. What did I do? Why did I play with that Gamma? While I was playing with the Gamma, everything was fine and it felt okay, on a teaching tennis level, not on a playing for real level. But because I played with it for so long, when I then switched to my regular racket, it was ruined. But the good news is that I then continued playing with my regular racket, and after maybe 3 days, it was back to normal. So that feeling of not being able to swing and get the ball very deep and the racket was feeling heavy, that went away and it felt normal again. So this is the thing that people have to realize, that you get used to your equipment. You do. And it's something that that's super tricky. It's very tricky. And your perception of what things are based on your muscle memory. So generally, a 300-gram racket is not heavy, right? That's a lighter racket. But because I was using something lighter before, that 300-gram felt super heavy to me, right? So this is just a super complex thing.
Yeah, it's funny with that. Like, and that's the problem. That's what I tell people. Like, if you keep switching, since I am in that eternal hell of like switching, testing new rackets all the time, I know what it does to my game, right? Like, I know that it's tough to build. You need to have either a reset frame or at least like two different ones that okay, I'm home here. You have to have a home. Otherwise, you're testing. Now there's racket release period now, Australian Open. All the brands want to have a new line out, right? They want to have an upgrade so that they're on top of people's minds when new players enter. Also, like all the new players now get different cosmetics, right? So they show up. Okay, some pros they switch rackets because like they lost their sponsor or they just wanted a new contract thanks to their agent and so on, right? So it's a time where people buy new rackets. Now is the time I think we will see a lot of people like, oh, I bought this racket, for Christmas. I got the gift. I wanted to upgrade to the same racket as my favorite player has, the new cosmetic, whatever. So, and then the whole process of just getting used to it is starting, and it can be madness, it can be really like you can lose your game for like a month, and then you go back to your old racket, and then you have to rebuild, So
But look, there's got to be a reason why you want to switch rackets. It can't just be out of the blue. Just because it's Christmas. There's got to be a reason. Maybe your old rackets are worn off, because that can happen. A racket frame if you play with it a lot, it does wear off and it does change the way it plays. And it might be a dead frame, you know what I mean? Even though it doesn't have any cracks in it. So if that's the case, you got to switch rackets. But maybe you're playing awful. Maybe you're looking for the racket to suit your game a little better. It makes a lot of sense. Or maybe, most importantly, you have pain anywhere in your arm, and selecting the correct racket to relieve some of that pain is super important. And in those circumstances, it makes a lot of sense to switch. But just switching the rackets for the heck of it, like all the time, it's a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea, and it's only going to cause problems.
Yeah, 100%. I can say that, like, in a lot of the guys who I talk to that test rackets, whether they are racket designers for some brand or they're tennis warehouse people, that test all the rackets and stuff, they often have some arm issues or something because, like, it's not good for your muscles to keep testing so much. I've been lucky because, I do gym 4 times a week to strengthen, forearms and muscles stuff. That helps a lot to stay injury free, right? That helps me quite a bit. But so then it's fine for me to test. I don't get like arm issues really anymore. I've been lucky with that stuff.
Because you're used to it. You've done it so much. I think your body's used to it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
My
think
body knows that there would be something new here,
Of course, but I think a major cause of tennis elbow is switching rackets. Just regardless of the specs of the racket, just the sheer action of playing with something different can cause problems. And there's only one time in my life where I had tennis elbow pain, and that was shortly after college. I was teaching tennis in Rockford, Illinois, at the Clock Tower Racket Club, and I forget the name now. I would give him a shout out, but it was the Wilson rep for the Chicago area, and he gave me a contract, And so at that particular time, the racket that was popular or that just came out was the Encode. Remember the Encode?
And
it was the one that the Bryan brothers were using. But it turns out when I later on moved to Hawaii, and the Bryan brothers were practicing at my club, and they actually were playing with the Wilson Pro staff, but that's besides the point. But I selected the Bryan brothers Encode racket, and because I thought it looked cool and it felt pretty decent. And I gave lessons with this thing for like maybe, I don't know, half a week or something like that. And I started experiencing horrendous pain in my elbow, like excruciating pain. I couldn't even like work the gear shifter in my car. Like it was really, really bad. Yeah, it was really bad pain. So I said, you know what, like this is pretty easy to pinpoint where this pain came from. It's obviously the racket, because I'm using the same strings. Nothing's changed except the racket. I went back to my Wilson Hyper Hammer 5.2, and guess what happened? After one day of teaching lessons and hitting with that racket, the pain in my arm miraculously disappeared. Now, here's the unfortunate thing, is that I had about 10 of these Wilson Hyper Hammers. While I was in college, my dad kept sending me some, so I was stocking up on this racket pretty good. And so I had about 10 of them, but I was so like decisive on switching rackets that I gave 9 of these rackets to one of these kids at the club to sell it on eBay, and the kid immediately sold all of them. And so when I then decided to go back to my Hyper Hammer, I only had one left.
Yeah, still good.
So then what happened was I became like a hunter for rackets on the internet, and I started going to all these websites, especially eBay. And I did get my hands of a bunch of Wilson Hyper Hammers 5.2, but it became increasingly difficult. And this is actually a good lesson for everybody watching, because 2 of my rackets that were my favorites were so used up that on my rackets, I don't know how it is with you, Jonas, but like just a corner of the racket gets used up on top. I don't know if that's probably from the backhand slice, but it's like right here gets eaten up. And the more I play with a racket, the more severe it gets eaten up. And on these particular Hyper Hammers, it was so like destroyed that part of the racket that the frame was like this thin, and you can see the insides of the frame. So the racket completely deteriorated, but I continued to play with it until the bitter end, but it didn't play the same. And so I was basically forced to switch because, first of all, I couldn't get them anymore, and and the ones that I still had were basically unplayable. The frames were dead. And so that's when I started testing. A long process. You know, you want to talk about like finding the right racket. It took forever, and I tried everything. I tried pretty much everything before settling on there was a Pure Drive Plus, the regular version, the 300-gram version that I settled on. So, yeah, that's my tennis elbow story.
Yeah, but it's a good learning. I think it's like I never had that bad like tennis elbow that where I cannot drive, but I've had like where I feel like the forearm is so stiff that it's like it's making regular things in life a little bit more. You feel a little bit discomfort. It's not pain, but it's discomfort, right? It's like, but I've been lucky in that sense. But you have people like I get messages all the time where people are like, I can't, you know, they have to take 6 months off for painkillers, and it's like this thing. So it's something to really take seriously, right?
It's a really, really annoying pain, and it makes, you know, we want to have fun playing tennis. You're not going to have fun with tennis elbow. It's just not going to be fun. You know,
no.
It's a horrible thing, and you got to do everything possible to prevent it. And if you have it, to get rid of it.
Yeah, and strings. Strings, right gear, but also like physical preparation. Yeah. Technique, exactly.
Technique too. But in my case, what we're talking about now is like switching rackets. That's what caused it. You know, so you gotta be very careful with with switching. So something to keep in mind.
I agree. I say that all the time, but then a lot of people who follow me thinks that half the fun is the switching. So it's also a tricky thing. And one thing to relate to what you said, which I talked about with my buddy Henrik, is also a chronic racket switcher. You know, he's like it's that if you have a racket you play with, like what happened to you, you're like, oh, I'm gonna switch now, and you sold all the rackets you had, and you had a bunch. Like most people maybe have 2 or 3, you know.
Yeah.
But it happened to me many times, like where I have a racket that like, okay, I play well with this, but I want something new for whatever reason. I'm testing something feels a bit better in the moment. Then I sell those, and then you regret it, and you're like, you were stuck without rackets. Like it's not easy to go back. You have to start chasing on forums. Maybe they're not available on the typical retail sites, Tennis Warehouse or whatever. So you're like then regretting it big time, especially if it's an older racket. So keep a racket that's been your standard racket. Don't go for the easy bucks if you don't need them desperately, because I think it's better just to keep it. You know, it's not worth the money to sell it. It's
definitely a mistake to sell rackets, and I learned that the hard way as I told that story from before. But yeah, just hang on to the rackets. But something else you mentioned, there's these racket collectors out there, and I'm certainly one of them, and that's a whole another like hobby, so to speak, and it's fun to have different rackets. I have all kinds of rackets, and it's also fun to play with them. So that's fine. But then when you actually are playing matches, now you got to pick your favorite. Like in your case, if you had to play a match tomorrow, like which racket in this match was super important, I'm guessing would be the Pro Kennex you would choose, right?
Yeah, from today, yes, that would be, that would be
so I think it's okay to have a ton of rackets, but then have that one racket that is actually your playing racket, you know?
Yeah, I think that's 100%. Like a one that you go back to and you feel like at home. Like,
exactly.
For example.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for your case, like since I think the one you used, the Hyperhammer 5.2, that was also slightly extended. So you went to the Plus, you had a little bit more even extended the racket, right? Because the Plus is 27.5, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you know that, but the Hyperhammer 5.2 is longer.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like 27.25.
Oh, you did say it. Oh, this is unbelievable. How do you know this?
I know this stuff.
This is why you're the GOAT. You understand? Like, do you know, like, nobody knows this? Nobody knows this racket. It's been like...
No, I know this one. I mean, I think, like, this is a racket that was the foundation of Kei Nishikori,
of course.
Henin Hardan.
It's the same mold as the Age 22 you're talking about, the Kachanov racket.
No, not Age 22. This is they call it, they have a different name for it. I will remember it, but it's like Wilson.
But it's a Nishikori, correct?
Nishikori, but he did never play the Age 22. He played with this. This is a 95 square.
What's it called? What Nishikori had?
He used a hammer, but it was the pro stock name. I'm blanking.
What was the name of it? Age something, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like that, the Nishikori mold was exactly the same as my Hyperhammer mold.
Yep.
Exactly the same. It was thick on the same places, same beam width, same racket. It was a 95, same length. So it was the same racket, but obviously, I actually tried that one, the Nishikori one. It was a lot heavier. It was too heavy for me.
Yeah.
Mine was like
Azarenko's used this, and Hardan, Henin Hardan. So
yeah, that's why I say. And you know who else played with this for a little while? Todd Martin.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
good serving racket. Like it's a very nice because it goes through the air quick, and yet that extra length helps the pop on the
But that's
serve.
what
So it's,
that's probably the primary reason why I liked it, because the length helps your serve. So that's why I like extended rackets.
yeah,
But
for
again,
your game, it makes 100% sense. You know, and I think for a lot of players, it could be like if you're big on the serve or like you play a double-handed backhand, like
yeah.
it's possible to use an extended frame. You get a bit more with it, you know. So
But
it's
Jonas, seriously, like you're being modest now. But to have the length of a rack of a random Wilson racket from like 25 years ago, and to know the length, 27.25, which is 100% correct. To know that, this is impressive. I'm very impressed. I'm just want to tell you that I'm very impressed.
the depressive or impressive, we'll see. But I know that one. I also
I
actually,
guess.
yeah. No, but I also I've tested all the rackets, man. Like so, I know
Okay.
that racket because it was one of those rackets that I really liked.
Yeah.
It was not the Hyper Hammer, but it was the one that came after the N Pro.
And code.
Yeah, the Encode version. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
But
one I didn't
this
like so much.
no, it felt different, right? Like this one was a bit stiffer, the one you
It
played.
was the same mold. It had a different paint job. It was like definitely more of a glossy paint, and it was orange and white. And I remember
Yeah,
my
I have
dad.
two in the closet here. Yeah,
Yeah, my dad liked this racket. My dad played with it. I did not like it because it was a little bit different. So I
but
never
you also
really
like a bit of a firmer racket. Like that's probably been your thing. Like you like a bit of a stiffer racket, right? That was softer, I think.
always because ultimately I like responsiveness. So like to me, I like a powerful racket, as powerful as possible. I don't like a dead racket. And when I play with a dead racket, I don't like the way my strokes feel. You know, I wanna do very little effort on the court because I like to bunt the ball. My swings are, you know, they have a tendency to be long in the back, short in the front. Some of them. So I like responsiveness. Now, on the other hand, my technique probably suffered somewhat from that preference that I had. I think my game would have benefited from playing with a typical modern racket that's more head light and probably a little bit softer, more low power, and probably more a string that's low power as well, like hollow power, you know, something like that. I think I would have been forced to have more of a fuller swing path and not have the ability to play like I do sometimes, where I'm just kind of bunting the ball around and stuff like that. I think I would have probably benefited from different equipment. I'm honest enough to admit that, but my preference is what it is, you know, especially when I'm teaching. I want to do, I'm just completely, I don't know if you ever saw me hit when I teach, but I'm just bunting,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yeah.
So when I have a racket that is not very responsive, I'm bunting around, I just don't get enough out of the racket. I want the racket to play for me in a way. So that's always been my preference and always will be. But it's not necessarily the best for my game. I just want to put that out there. It's like I probably could benefit from a different specs, but yeah.
The funny thing with this, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but the funny thing is like with, because I know a lot of coaches, right, and pretty high level coaches, and they, a lot of them like they have a racket. The coaching drives them to an easier racket because like you're doing so much,
yes,
so much hitting, and you want to minimize effort, right? So you can't obviously do full swings on your coaching, and sometimes you just want to block the ball back, and the ball still gets a decent. And it's also that thing where if you just block, the pace will not overpower the other person who's not as good hitting it back to you. So it's like it's almost like you have a coaching racket, you know. It's some people I know do that. They have like one racket for coaching, one racket for playing.
Well, here's the
it's
facts.
also difficult, you know.
Like a racket that's low power requires a fuller swing. Okay, there's absolutely no argument about that. And so, when you're teaching, you're not taking full cuts on the ball, especially when you're playing with low level players. So what are you doing? You're either feeding or bunting or you're volleying back. So obviously, those type of rackets, they're going to be a pain in the butt to teach with. It's much easier to take a Gamma 117 and just tap the ball and the ball flies on its own. So you're going to do that 8 hours a day. It's going to be a lot easier than doing it with a super dead racket where you actually have to. I mean, you can do the same thing. It's not that big of a difference, but you do feel more effort and it becomes tedious after a while. So you're right. There is definitely such a thing as a teaching racket, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes sense. Yeah, I want to get into like, because I mean, you're doing these Monday morning rants. You don't call them rants maybe anymore.
I do. I call it Monday Monday rant.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We discussed that a while back, and we have. I mean, I know you're a big Rafa fan, as am I,
Yeah.
and he pulled out now of the Australian Open, but there was some like me and my tennis friends. We were discussing this, like, wow, Rafa is back. We were watching some of his tennis, and it looked like vintage Rafa, right?
Yeah.
It was impressive to see. What is your overall feeling like about his chances for this season? You know, based on what you've seen so far.
Unfortunately, it's all down to how his body will react to those brutal rallies that he's going to be exposed to. The better the level of the opponent gets, it's going to be down to that. If his body can withstand that pain, so to speak, because ultimately it is pain to play tennis at that level. It's excruciating, it's exhausting, but his body has been through it. He's older, and there's a high risk of injury, not only his hip but other parts of his body. Because I made a video a while back titled "Tennis is Unhealthy," and I listed all the injuries that Rafa has had, and it's pretty much his whole body. It's different body parts, and any of those parts can get re-injured. Now, I think he is a little bit more prone to injury than other players. So unfortunately, it's going to come down to that. When we're talking about his level of play, I do feel like there was some rust, but more in the important moments. In that quarterfinal against Thompson, where he missed balls on match points that he would never miss. So that was more of a mental thing. But I felt like the way he played in that tournament, if you imagine that style, once he gets more matches in his system, once the confidence goes up, he's going to be difficult to beat on clay. And he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think he has a chance, of course, to win big clay court titles, even the French Open. I do believe that. I really do, because that's just such a horrendous opponent to face, Nadal. That forehand is such a nightmare, you know what I mean? Like, just imagine that spin going to your backhand, whether you have a one-handed backhand or a two-handed backhand, and to have to do that non-stop on clay, where it's harder to make winners anyway. It's an absolute nightmare. And as long as he's healthy, as long as he's fit, he's going to have a chance to take big titles on clay. Now, I even think that he can do some good results on hard court. I hate when he gets like, man, there's so many trolls on Instagram. I don't know if you're on Instagram or on Twitter, and that are insulting Nadal. They're not showing any respect to him. And
I haven't seen that actually. Yeah.
You haven't seen that. You haven't
Well,
seen on
on
Instagram.
Twitter, like, I'm often not frequenting, so I mean, I post and I ghost
Well,
a bit.
there's a lot. There's quite a bit. It kind of depends who posts it. So if it's Nadal posting it, is definitely less. There's a lot of love, a lot of his fans, because they're a huge fan base. But if it's just a Tennis TV or Eurosport or Tennis Channel posting something, that's where you see the trolls.
Mm-hmm.
When they post a clip of Nadal, he's done. Weak Dal, clay Dal, he should retire. Like, just trolls, right? So often what I hear is that he's not good on hard court. And on a recent rant, I said that if you took clay out of the equation for Rafa and you only counted his grass and hard court results, he would still be inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and his career would equal the ones of like Wielander, Edberg, Becker, like legends of the game. So he is not really a clay court specialist. Of course, he's the greatest clay court player in the history of the game, but he's unbelievable on grass. Do you remember young Rafa on grass? But even like in 2022, he would have made that final. He would have beaten Kyrgios. I don't know if he would have beaten Djokovic, but he always has a chance against Djokovic on clay and grass, I feel. On hard court, sometimes he gets blown out, but he's an amazing grass court player. 5 Wimbledon finals. So he is, of course, unbelievable on hard court too. How about those U.S. Open victories where he even beat Djokovic? You know what I mean? So like, he's an amazing, like, I just love watching him play, and I just wish. See, the thing is, like, I was thinking about this recently. I'm a huge basketball fan. I used to even play basketball, and my favorite team of all time was the Bulls in the 90s, because I'm a huge Jordan fan. I'm a huge Dennis Rodman fan, and I'm a huge Tony Kukoc fan, who's from Split, Croatia. I'm from Split, Croatia. So I love that Bulls team, and I was still living in Germany at the time, and they were broadcasting all the games. And man, I was watching those games, and I love Jordan so much. And of course, he won his sixth NBA championship, and he made that game-winning shot against Utah on the road, right? And that was like the perfect retirement. But when I was in college, it was in the early 2000s, Jordan decided to come back and play for the Wizards. And now, of course, the team wasn't that great, and Jordan was older, and he wasn't the same player. So he kind of ruined his retirement a little bit, right? Because he came back. So this is the difficult thing about retiring. As I said in my latest rant, Sampras did it absolutely perfect. He just called it quits after winning that US Open, where he had a subpar year. I think it was 2002. He lost to George Bostel in I think it was the second round of Wimbledon, and he was
I remember that, yeah.
not regarded as the favorite for the US Open. People were calling him old and slow, and just similar to what Rafa's getting now, right? From the trolls. So he comes in there and he plays unbelievable. The guys that he beat in that tournament, I think he beat Roddick, and Roddick was on top of the world back in those days. And I think he beat Safin, if I remember correctly. He beat unbelievable players. He beat Haas, I think. I don't remember it exactly, but I know he beat Roddick, and of course he beat Agassi in the final, and he just calls it quits. Now, can you think of a better retirement in any sport? It's beautiful, right? So that's what you wish for your favorite player to do. Now, it's probably going to turn out that Rafa should have retired after winning the 2022 French Open, because if his body continues to break down, it's going to be kind of a sad ending to it. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
that could easily happen. I wish and I hope that it doesn't, that his body holds up and he's able to play. And this injury that he has now, it's not as bad as the other one. It's just a micro tear in a muscle, which heals fast. So everything is cool. Everything is good. But I just hope that he stays healthy, and I hope that he wins the Olympics, and then he just calls it quits. And that would be a beautiful ending to the story. And that's what you wish for your favorite player to do. You hate to see them kind of fall apart at the end. It kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you see a legendary player like Murray, for example, get so much hate online. You watch some of his matches, like, for example, when he lost in Paris to Diminau and he smashed his rackets, and when he lost to Safiullin in Beijing, and he was also screaming. And you read those comments, it's just sad. Like, this guy is one of the greatest players, and in the last maybe 20 years or so, the guy deserves the respect. But he's losing all the time, and people are writing negative things about him, and you hate to see something like that happen to someone that's as great of a player. But ultra competitive athletes, you have to respect their choice to keep competing at all cost. Like Jordan came back. I was there watching those games for the Wizards when he came back. I watched every single one, and I loved it. And you see it as the ultimate competitor. And Rafa is the same way. He loves competition. He wants to come back and play again. And Murray is the ultimate competitor. He's got that, I don't know if it's a metal hip or whatever, and he's out there playing and fighting. So you have to respect that. You have to respect that as a fan. Their competitiveness and the willingness to go out there even when the results are poor. So in Rafa's case, I'm hoping that the body will heal up. I don't think the results will be poor. I think if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be difficult to deal with, especially on the clay courts.
Yeah, I also hope that he gets a nice farewell. I mean, like, I think the Roland Garros would probably be the most fitting, like a win there and then like a retirement. I think what happens is, I also believe like the players should play as long as they want. Like, we who are we to say like, hey, you should retire, Okay,
Exactly.
They take wild cards here and there. I understand from some players that it's like, it feels like that they take some spots or whatever, but they also brought a lot of fans to the game and a lot of love to the game.
Of course.
So they deserve the respect, and I feel like it's silly when people start like telling people to retire, whether it's Murray or Rafa or Federer or whatever.
Well, that's not even the I'm sorry, but to cut you off, but that's not even the worst example. There are a lot more worse examples. For example, Wilander, your countryman. I don't know if you remember, like, Wilander was absolute legend of the game, right?
Yeah.
And then he was out for a while, and he decided to come back, and he was playing, but he was ranked like around 100. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
For a couple of years, and that wasn't even that bad. Well, what about Borg when he came back and played with wooden rackets when everybody was already using graphite? And he played a whole year like that. What about Muster when he came back and started playing challengers?
So I remember Muster team in Vienna. I watched that. I think he's like, you would be like, okay, this guy, he strings his rackets 40 kilos. You know, Muster always used to string, and he comes in, he's 40 years old, Dominic team, and he gets. It wasn't demolished, maybe, but he lost pretty bad. I think I remember.
What racket was Muster using? That's what I want to know.
It was the Pro Tour 630, the PT 7A.
Prestige?
Yeah, the same Murray, like the same racket as Murray uses, and Gilles Simon.
That's what Muster was playing with?
Yeah, but heavy and high tension, very high tension.
But again, like you said, who are we to tell Muster don't do that? You know, I respect their competitiveness, but you know,
it's more for their own their own legacy. Like I understand, like the way Sampras ended was perfect, but you cannot order that. You cannot just like pay for that. You have to be lucky that you're injury free, that you get the draw, that you get the chance. I mean, Ivanisevic, he had 3 Wimbledon finals. Who knows if he should have qualified a wild card, wins the 4th, historical moment, amazing scenes, cries, and you know his father in this time, amazing story. Could easily have been like he lost first round. Could easily have been, right? So you don't know. It's that they try and they believe they can do it. That's the beautiful part, and then hopefully it turns out nice. But who knows? You know, sports is tough, right? So,
well, see, even in Ivanisevic's part, he really wanted to come back the next year and be the opening match in center court. So that was for him the primary reason to keep going for another year, and then he retired after that. You know, but even if you look at Federer, like his last year was also kind of sad, you know?
Yeah, it was sad. Well, I didn't like that. Like, I wish he would have won the 2019 final. And
he should have won that one.
Yeah, that felt like a bit of a robbery. And then after that, it was all pretty sad. Like, we had COVID, and then tennis just lost a little bit of luster after that. He came back.
Yes.
You know.
And it was just, he was a step slower.
Of course, yeah.
I saw that when he played Andruhar in Geneva on clay.
Yeah.
And it was maybe one of the worst matches I've ever seen Federer play. And it was like that last year, and it was just a matter of time until he was going to be gone, you know?
So, but getting the Sampras trajectory, what I like with Rafa, when you saw Rafa now, is like, okay, rust, obviously. There's no chance it's not going to be rust.
Right.
But the Vamos was still there. The effort, the intensity, everything was there. It's just about like injury or no injury. Because if he's on his level where he's intense enough, obviously he can win the French Open. He might not win the US Open, but the French Open, he has a good chance of winning it, you know, with this kind of tennis.
I agree. 100%. He definitely has a chance. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
And the Olympics is also going to be played on clay or no? I don't know that.
See, I'm not clear on that. I think it's going to be played at Roland Garros, the Olympics. That's what I thought. It's going to be played at Roland Garros, the Olympics.
So he can win two clay titles to finish.
That's why I said finish his career at the Olympics at Roland Garros.
Yeah.
But winning another gold. Like, I couldn't think of a better scenario.
That would be good.
But knowing Rafa, like, I think if he's... Because here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. In 2022, Rafa was in a tremendous amount of pain when he won the French Open. Carlos Moya said that he's never seen anything like it in his whole life watching tennis, because Rafa was really injured. And he can play through a tremendous amount of pain, Rafa. And we watched his match against Taylor Fritz at Wimbledon in the quarters, where his family was begging him to stop from the stands, and Rafa just kept going and ended up winning that match. So he can play through a tremendous amount of pain. So I feel like if he can win the French with pain, right? But I feel like if Rafa is feeling healthy and doesn't have pain, I think he's going to keep going. He's not going to stop this year. He's going to add another year to it.
Yep,
I think the only reason for Rafa to retire, if his body is at the level where like it's just too much, you know. Yeah. It's just too hurt, too injured, and that's when you're going to call it quits.
If it turns out into like the Federer thing, where Federer couldn't compete, right? He couldn't, his knees were too bad. Like then there's no point, you know. Why do you continue?
Exactly.
It's because Novak keeps going, and he has a wrist problem now for the Australian Open a little bit, but we know he's also won Grand Slams with pain. So these guys, they can
He
go
has,
through pretty much anything, right? Go
for
through a
sure.
brick wall, to win
Oh yeah.
Grand Slams. Pretty
Yep.
impressive. So who do you think, like Australian Open? Do you have any predictions?
I think it's going to be Djokovic, simply based on his momentum that he's carrying from last season. I feel like that's where it's really difficult to beat Djokovic because he always finishes the year really strong by winning the World Tour Finals, by winning Paris, even Shanghai back when before they took the tournament away for a while. And then he carries that over into the new season, and he does really well. Then he continues to do well. Sometimes he blasts through Indian Wells, Miami, and then on clay sometimes there's some sketchy results, right? So, and then he picks his confidence back up for Wimbledon usually. So I feel like this part of the season and the calendar, it's very difficult to beat Djokovic. And I still think that if he plays the way he played in the World Tour Finals, which was unbelievable, I think he's the favorite to win. On the women's side, the big four are Swiatek, Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Coco Gauff. And I think the two players that are playing the best right now are Swiatek and Rybakina. So it's going to be like a toss-up between those two. But just based on that first tournament win from Rybakina, where she blasted through the draw and beat Sabalenka 0-3, I feel like I'm going to pick her. So I'm picking Djokovic and Rybakina to win the titles.
Pretty good picks, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really go with any outsiders. It's just really tough, I think if you want to talk about a dark horse, I feel like Zverev, maybe. He's going to take a lot of motivation and confidence from that United Cup win. He could do well, but it also depends a little bit on his draw. And on the women's side, it's so wide open. There's so many players that can go deep and make a surprise run. The WTA is so competitive right now. There's so many great players. So it's really impossible to make a prediction. There's always somebody that goes through that you didn't think was going to go through, So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Swiatek on the women's side because I think what I saw her play in the United Cup was just I mean, also Rybakina is one super impressive player, right? And you can never count out Sabalenka, but those are the three for me. I think Gauff, maybe this one not quite, but she will have a good year overall.
She played well though. Remember, she won the U.S. Open. She won the first tournament of the year.
Exactly. She won the first. Yeah, I forgot about that. She won the first.
I think she got blown away from from Iga at the WTA finals, but remember that was super windy.
Yeah. No, that tournament was a bit of a shit.
Swiatek was the best wind player by far. Nobody plays in the wind like her because she has probably more spin than the other ones, and she moves better than anybody. So she's like the female combo of Djokovic and Rafa. So she's going to perform really well in the wind, but I do think that Coco is in the mix, even though a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually,
yeah, a lot of people are negative about her for no reason whatsoever. It's so much.
I thought she was pretty hyped up now after the winning the U.S. Open. No.
I must be on a different part of the internet than you.
Yeah, you should avoid this part of the internet. It sounds like very negative. That part.
Where are you at? This is all positive, but for a while prior to the summer swing, she was getting a tremendous amount of hate on her forehand.
And, that one I did see that. It was when Gilbert came in. I did see the forehand stuff. Everybody's an expert, and I mean, obviously she had I talked to Rick Macy about that because he had offered to help her.
That's right.
And she had a kink on her forehand that needed to be kind of kinked out, I guess.
Right. Well, it turns out that Gilbert didn't do anything that he kinked out. He just stopped talking about the forehand, stopped obsessing on it. And that was good enough for her to stop obsessing on it too. Very similar to Felipe in my 10-day tennis transformation, where he was obsessing on his technique where he didn't need to. There was only a couple of small things that he needed to adjust. And so with Coco, I always saw that in the singles, she would get a little tight against certain opponents at certain score lines. And in doubles, she would play completely free because she's one of the best doubles players in the world. I think at one point she was ranked number 1 in the world in doubles. I don't know if she still is. I don't think so. But in doubles, she would rip the forehand and hit it freely. And then in singles, she'll be a little tight. So that to me is a clear indicator it's a mental issue, not a technical one. And I regard Brad Gilbert as one of the greatest coaches of all time at that level, as a tour coach. And from what I read, he just completely stopped obsessing on the forehand and it worked because she regained confidence and blasted through that summer series of tournaments, won everything, including the U.S. Open, and then did play pretty well at the WTA finals, but at the wind was absolutely no chance against Iga. So when I read now, some of the commentary on her, I do feel like, the thing with Coco is that people want to compare her to Serena really bad, and they want her to be the next Serena, and she's just simply not that. Don't think at that same level, okay? To be the greatest of all time. But I do think Coco, I saw her in person playing many times. She's an unbelievable player, capable of being number one in the world in singles and doubles, which is absolutely amazing. But do I think that she can win like 24 slams like Serena? Probably not. But people want her for some reason to be the next Serena, and I think that's the way they're putting a lot of expectations, and there's a lot of trolling and stuff like that. And then on top of all that, this is what I do for a living, tennis technique. They're not understanding her forehand. They're not understanding her forehand technique, and I think that she has a horrible forehand, which she doesn't. It was really a confidence thing. So, like I said, I put her in the mix to do big things this year, including the Australian Open. She does have a chance to go deep and maybe even win. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's good. And the women's draw is always kind of more interesting on paper, at least. Like it looks a little bit, because with Djokovic, you always have that, especially the way he finished. Like he's so good in these circumstances that you can't like count out that he's just gonna blow through the field. Like it's there's a risk of that. Would be fun to see like Sinner, for example. He's my dark horse, kind of. I think he finished really strongly, and he can do some good stuff this year.
But can you call him a dark horse though? Like he's like
no,
a
he's
favorite.
more of an open. No, he's more of a favorite, right? Yeah.
Who's your dark horse? Like a lower ranked guy? Would you be your dark horse? Somebody that's not expected to win? Like, can you pick somebody that you think can do well?
Zverev is probably too high ranked. He's a top 10 player, I guess.
Okay. I mean, all right. I get it.
I agree, though, that the way he played at the United Cup, the mental thing he showed there was quite impressive, right? And he came back. He won the trophy from Poland. Was just like all over it. Like Hurkacz had match points. Yep. Like the way he played the last two matches there was pretty solid, right? Like that's very impressive. Yeah.
If you remember when he got hurt, when he rolled his ankle in the French Open,
so good.
He could have beaten Rafa. He was playing top 3 tennis in the world. He was top 3, in my opinion. He was playing unbelievable.
I agree, 100%. I saw that match and I was like blown away by how good he was. Like I was like, I've never seen him play like this. It's crazy.
And then when he came back, his level obviously wasn't the same. I was actually very surprised when he came back that he didn't immediately jump to like top 5. He didn't. And I was surprised because I thought that's what he would do. But I think that he does belong up there. I think he does belong in the top 5. I think
I put him. See him play like that. Yeah.
So I think when you talk about like true dark horses that nobody's thinking about, players that I'm impressed with, it's Hamad Medjedovic.
Very good
He's
player.
A Serbian guy, and I watched him last year at a tournament. I think it was in Sofia. And I was like, wow, I never seen anything like it, man. Like he was ripping the ball so hard. Now, I know everybody hits hard. Don't get me wrong. All these guys that you see, they're hitting hard. All the WTA players are hitting hard. But something about him, like he's got a fast arm. He's got a humongous serve. That guy impressed me a lot. And he's kind of a different build. He's not your typical like 6-pack abs type of guy. He's it reminds me a little bit of Becker, like, I don't know. Something about him is interesting. So I like him. There's another guy who like is intriguing to me as Shevchenko. You know him?
Yeah. I've seen him a bit.
A beautiful serve, huge game, very modern technique, like, forehand, backhand, a great mover. So I think he's got chances to do well. Safi Ulin, who you know personally, I think.
Yeah.
That guy is such a beast. Wow.
Yeah, he's good. No, he's good.
He's so solid. Did you see him take out Alcaraz in Paris?
Yep. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So that guy can go deep. Then of course, like you got the really young guys like Van Ascher, and then the Arthur Fils. Like,
Fields, I'm more impressed by than Manache is good, but I think Fields has the power and the modern game, and also
he
he has already
does.
won a title.
Yeah,
He's one of the guys that I
Banashe
rate
is like
very
a
highly.
Banashe is like a Goffin type,
Yeah, yeah,
which I
exactly.
do think there's still a time and a place for guys like that. I do think so. Like those type of guys can still do some damage. So those are the young guys. Like I do think that it's going to be tough for them, to go deep. But those are, if you ask me, like a true dark horse, somebody that nobody's thinking about, there would be like those 4 or 5 guys.
Yep, I agree with that. I mean, Ben Shelton is quite interesting. I mean, pretty hyped up in the States.
Well, I mean, the reason why I'm not mentioning him because like he's already part of the mix, right? Like he's already won the title, and people are thinking of him. I'm like, because you said like, talk about a true dark horse, somebody that nobody knows. Like you got to pick guys that are a little bit more under the radar. So, but yeah,
I agree.
he's man, that serve. I mean, I did a video on his serve. It's something from a technical standpoint that I've rarely seen. It is an incredible serve. It's unbelievably powerful, very difficult to return. And on top of all that, he's lefty. So he's, with that serve, he's going to be a nightmare to play against for many years to come. And he's capable of doing big things,
Yep, agree. No, he's a guy that's interesting to watch as well. He apparently changed a little bit of his forehand. He tried to make it shorter, as I saw some video. I mean, and it looks different,
Is there ever gonna be a time when somebody makes their forehand longer? That's what I want to see. I want to see that one guy who like goes against the grain and like, well, let's make the forehand a little bit longer. Let's make the forehand like Wawrinka or Djokovic.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens. Now it's always
no, it's a good point. Like, I mean, the way Djokovic plays with his swings, and I guess like everybody's thinking, how can I gain time? It's all about gaining time in this crazy pace they play with, right? I guess
it gets a little more complex than that. But the time that you gain is actually it's insignificant. That's why you see somebody like a Bonjusova. And you got to understand that the women's ground strokes are very similar in speed to the men's ground strokes. And she won Wimbledon with a typical WTA backswing. You have Coco Gauff with a typical WTA backswing, won the US Open. So timing is really not influenced by that. I will say that it's definitely less likely that you're going to have success on the ATP where, there's also the factor of spin that also changes the equation. So you have seen in the 2000s players with a little bit larger backswings, WTA style, but it's going to be a different backswing. I think that's why it's such a huge topic because coaches see this in the last 20 years since, I don't know how long YouTube's been around, but you've seen this countless times where people show you a typical WTA forehand and an ATP forehand and I see, okay, the ATP forehand is shorter and the take back, and I think this is the way to do it. But it gets a lot more complex than that. And there's actually a lot more different types of forehands on the ATP than people tend to believe. And I always say, like, listen, you want to talk about great forehands? Why is Djokovic never considered? Like, I put him very high. I put him at number 3 in my top 5 forehand videos. And it's one of the cleanest forehand techniques that you will see. And it's got a longer backswing, okay? The racket goes right behind it. Like, it doesn't go WTA style, but it goes pretty far back. And he's just fine. Like, so I feel like there's a little bit of an obsession on, you talk about, Shelton doing that. There's a little bit of an obsession on this in the last, ever since YouTube came out and people started posting slow-mo from tournaments, ever since people saw these differences. Because here's the thing, though. This is why I say YouTube, because when you look at a forehand in real time, you don't see the length of the backswing because that part of the swing is continuous and it's already fast. So a WTA forehand looks phenomenal. Like, you look at like Simona Halep's forehand or Svitolina's forehand or Sharapova or Azarenka or whoever, and you look at it in real time, it looks beautiful, right? Sloane Stevens, Madison Keys, it looks beautiful in real time. But then when you slow it down, you start breaking it up in different parts. Now it starts looking ugly. And you see this at contact, they're like this. Iga, So Iga's forehand in real time, it looks beautiful, and slow motion looks ugly. So ever since people started looking at this on YouTube, coaching has drastically changed because this wasn't an area of discussion so much prior to the internet. And now there's an obsession with an incredibly short take back on the forehand. And in my opinion, this can work. Of course, it can work, no doubt about it. But it can also, depending on some circumstantial things, it can cause problems as well if you force something that doesn't suit you.
Yeah, and the technique is also a part of your whole footwork and your whole personality and the way you play. So it's like it's not an easy thing. You just press a button and now it's shorter. It's like it's a whole timing, everything, timing the whole chain. So it's not that
true.
easy.
It's more very complex actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah. So I
a lot of
think
moving parts.
I think you raise a good point. I think that YouTube and the presence of all these hours and hours of video analysis from billions and billions of coaches and people, and it's like it also can get into players' heads, it can get into coaches' heads, it can be like they start obsessing over details that in a match situation, like who cares how it looks, it's all about what results, like you're winning your matches. It's not really like how it's the same thing like you talked about.
Yes.
Coco Gauff, which was interesting, is that Brad Gilbert, he was not known for having good technique or style or anything special, but he got to 4 in the world. Like he's just was a very, very successful match player, right? And mentally very strong, smart, played his tennis the way he could maximize his potential. And to just say, okay, stop worrying about it, I think that's a smart move. Like that's the way to, when everybody's worrying, she also seems very sensitive, Coco Gauff, because I've also seen that she gets a lot of shit on the internet in her case, and she has to post sometimes, all you haters out there. She has to kind of address the haters, which is sad to see because she's winning Grand Slams. Why should she have to address haters? It's a stupid situation. But and I think he was, for him, I was really impressed by his move of being like, okay, let's not dive too much into this. Let's focus on you just like playing and winning and doing your thing. And it was, I think that was the way to go, actually. Not obsessing over these things.
It's true. It's true. Simple logic would tell you that if somebody is in the top 10, they probably have good technique, if they're in the top 1,000, they probably have good technique. Okay. That simple logic would tell you that. So technical things are probably very minor, or they would never have any chance to make it there, So it's a little bit different on the serve, I will say, because it's a whole nother story for another day. But when we're talking about forehand and backhand, those have to be pretty good if you want to make it to that level. So, what people often get confused with is style over fundamentals, and it's something that I cover in great depth on my website. I have a course that goes in depth on every single stroke, what the differences are in style and fundamentals. Now, unfortunately, coaching in the last 20 years, from what I've seen here in the junior tennis mecca of the world, which is Southeast Florida, is an obsession with style. Regardless of the age and the gender of the player, it's an obsession on style. And the person that's responsible for this the most, who I fault the most for this, is Roger Federer. Obviously not him, not he didn't do anything, but everybody is in love with Federer that's teaching tennis. 99% of coaches are in love with Federer, especially if they're a little bit older. They're stans of Federer. You know what I mean by stan?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So like they obviously want to teach that style, and that's how it all started on the serve also, by the way. And that's just something that is complete style, because what I've done with a lot of tedious work, and what I teach is fundamentals over style. So that is actually in itself a beautiful way, because now when you allow a player to develop their own style, you're going to see players with different styles. How it used to be. You mentioned Brad Gilbert, but there were so many different styles back in the day. You had, some quirky techniques too, like, Carsten Brasch. Remember him?
Yeah.
There was some quirky techniques out there. There was, Edberg had a weird forehand, but it was
very
more
effective, but it worked.
It was more freedom then. It was more style. Now, unfortunately, the trend is just a lot of similar looking strokes and just blasting from the baseline. So when you allow style to take care of itself, in my opinion, you get a more beautiful game. Now, of course, you have to teach the fundamentals, or you're not going to have a chance to get better at tennis. So there's no doubt about that. And now the question is like, what's style, what's fundamentals? That's where it gets a little bit tricky. But I do my best to try to put videos out there where I show the differences and what I think is important. And when we're talking about the length of the swing, while there are some like similarities on the ATP, it is a cornerstone of the intuitive tennis methodology that part of the stroke is developed intuitively and not messed with so much.
I
Now,
think that's
when
great.
somebody has issues, like when somebody has problems, now we can maybe look into doing some changes. But generally, I don't look like when you're playing tennis and the racket goes behind you, you can't see the racket. There's a lot of people don't realize that. Like you're looking forward at the ball, and you don't know what the racket's doing back there. So ultimately, it happens by feel. You know, when you don't put a lot of thought on that process, it's likely going to be something that your body figures out on its own, and it's likely going to be the same every time. By you focusing on it and try to do something, number one, it's going to be very difficult to do because you don't exactly know where the racket is. So ultimately, you're forced to break down your swing and lose all the continuity and the flow of it. And you just create big problems for yourself. And I think you mentioned Coco being very sensitive. I've seen actually, this is crazy, but on Facebook, this person will remain unnamed, but there's somebody that like secretly recorded Coco training and they were showing what they were doing on the forehand. And if I told you, like the comments is just insanity. So like, it was the obsession with her forehand was solely on really things that make no difference, which was her grip, which is more extreme, and the length of her take back. Both things that I would leave alone and not mess with. Why would I do that? Because there's evidence to show that there's nothing wrong with those things. Like I said, she was ripping the ball in doubles and number 1 in the world in doubles. And just the sheer fact that she's ranked so high and winning matches, and then it's a purely mental thing. So, you know, it's a long story short. Technique can get quite complex, and I think there has been a huge influence in the way tennis is coached because of the internet. I do think there's a huge connection with that, and Roger Federer.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking also it's funny because like I also see that like if you're on the club level, you're watching matches. I go to the ITF tournaments for seniors and
Yeah,
stuff, and people try to look so good when playing, but the results don't naturally come, you know. And you have guys like, I mean, if you go look at the pros, you have Medvedev looks technically quite ugly, and obviously all sound, but
yeah,
it's a joy for me personally to watch his style and a guy like Santoro or a guy like who it doesn't look so beautiful, but it works, and that's beauty in that, you know. Like the difference in the style is a beauty.
yeah,
Obviously, Federer was kind of the most clean looking Jordan of the game in many ways,
for sure,
but
for sure.
for rec players to imitate also the toughest, because the amount of physicality and like athleticism you need to play that type of game is not really
Yeah,
easily replicated either, right? So it's just not the right approach, I think.
yeah, it's true. I agree with you for sure.
But then yeah, he didn't have like the modern forehand is not what you think of with Roger Federer. Like, I mean, he has a modern forehand in many ways, but it's not like you don't. If you see the young guys today, if you talk about Medvedev, you talk about Shevchenko, the way they
Yeah,
hit the forehand now on these guys like Arthur Fils, it's very different from how Federer hit his forehand. You know, like
well,
technically
listen.
sound both, but very different.
First of all, the way you hold your racket is a huge factor on a forehand, and it affects many different things on the forehand. The angle of your wrist at the moment of contact, it affects a lot of things. And Roger Federer had a very classic grip with the Eastern forehand grip. So I agree that in that sense, it was more of a classic forehand, but apart from the grip, it had all the components of a modern forehand and very similar to the way the players hit it today. But the grip is classic. And so that has to be considered. And that's something that often people were not talking about at all. And they just try to copy the Federer forehand without even thinking about the grip. Not that you should change the grip just because Federer was using it, and nor is there anything wrong with an Eastern grip if it does come natural to a player. But see, Jonas, like tennis technique can get so complex. You can get so into the weeds with this. When you start looking at like the modern guys, the next gen guys, I don't even know if they're still called next gen, but let's call them the Alcaraz, Sinner, and so on. And you start looking at angles of that racket. When the racket goes back, it gets so confusing, it gets so complicated. But one thing you got to understand that this is something that both of them, I'm sure, they don't spend 1 second thinking about. It's people that are watching them in slow motion think about. They don't think about that. like I said, you're looking forward at the ball. You just go by feel back there, and because you're going by feel, it's developed naturally, and it's the same every time. And you're looking at the player on your phone or your computer from behind, and you're studying angles. Okay, the racket is here, it's there, and then you try to copy this. Well, how are you going to copy it? You got to break your stroke down, and you lose all the continuity, all the flow of it, and you're causing a lot of problems because of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's very good, advice as well. Not to
Yeah.
overthink that stuff.
No.
It's very easily happens. So for your end, like Intuitive Tennis 2024, do you have any New Year's resolutions? Do you have any big plans for this year? Are you going on any tennis trips, or what's in the store for you?
So in 2024, I definitely have plans to do something big. I really don't want to announce it because I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pull it off. But I have planned a series of videos that could be quite fun. But in addition to that, I plan to do a lot more tennis equipment videos because that's something that I really enjoy. And that's the connection that you and I have, where I'm a tennis nerd too. So I love tennis equipment, but not just rackets, also like shoes and ball machines and stuff like that, like just tennis equipment in general. So there's going to be a lot of videos on that coming this year. A few days ago, I played with Shamir for the first time in probably 6 months. He's a player that's very popular on my channel. And he was out for a while with a chronic foot injury, but he was able to find these insoles from this one doctor, and he's feeling a lot better. And so we played, and he's playing better, and he doesn't have as much pain. So he's going to be featured a lot more in 2024. I'm going to try to feature a ton of match play, and I hope that I can pull off the thing that I'm planning, but I just don't want to announce it. But in any case, I'm going to try to just continue to do my best and make the best videos possible, the most valuable videos possible, and share my passion for the game and my passion as a coach. That's why I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep plugging away.
That's great. I think people look forward to that. I think also you have coaching is your heart and soul, but I think all of us tennis YouTubers are also liking to talk tennis about whether it's like match play, it's gear, it's player profile, it's history, depending on your stance. So it's fun to cover more things tennis, because if you're just talking coaching, just talking gear, it can get a little bit repetitive, So it's fun to also cover some other topics sometimes in tennis.
I think a lot of these topics naturally overlap a little bit, like it's just all connected to each other. And I think all of it is important. And just to keep your channel interesting and entertaining, and also for yourself to keep, and not get bored with the whole process. If you keep making the same videos about how to hit a slice backhand, it's going to get boring after a while, right? And people are going to get turned off. So I feel like you have to be versatile. To see there's a lot of niches within the tennis niche, right? So, and I don't know if you say niche or niche. I always say niche. Could be wrong. I don't know.
Same. Yeah,
but there is the match niche, right? Winston Du. This guy deserves a shout out. Are you going to have him on the channel? Did you talk to him?
I should. Yeah, I haven't talked to him. Yeah, well, I have. He reached out on a comment, so I think I said I wrote something in the comments. But I don't really Sometimes it's not that easy to get a hold of people if they're not. It's only on YouTube, Yeah.
Of course. So he's a guy that's from Rockford, Illinois. He's in California now, obviously, but I used to live there and teach tennis there. So we have this connection, and I talk to him all the time. And what he's doing for the tennis community is so huge, because he's getting a lot of people to tune in and watch these matches, and it creates an interest for the game, and it's just fantastic. And he's doing so well. I mean, he puts all these interesting matchups on his channel, and that's great. Then you have Felix from Tennis Brothers. You go into his comments and you see all the time young players that are inspired to go out there and train. It's awesome. I see it all the time. Oh, Felix, I love your videos. I want to, you inspire me to go out there and train and play in college. So this content that we're making can be very inspiring, regardless of the niche, whether you're doing tennis equipment or whether you're doing technical videos or showing matches. if we can get people to get some inspiration to go out there and hit the courts, hey, that's, I think, what it's all about.
Yeah, I think that's the main goal that you should strive for, is to kind of bring,
Yes.
whether it's information or entertainment or hopefully a bit of both. I think that's it. Then do it in your own style and voice, and that's what you can bring, really. Like then it doesn't really matter what niche you're in, as long as you can bring that. Try to keep that your guiding star, I would say.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Cool. No, it sounds great. I hope to meet you in person maybe this year. We'll see if I get over to the States.
Well, I'm going to Europe too in the summer. I usually go to Europe in the summer, so
then we'll meet up. For sure.
We have to do an in-person interview. And
yes.
Maybe we'll play a set for the channel, for your channel, and you beat up on me.
That will not happen.
You give me a good beating with your Pro Connects.
If I give you maybe some complete shit racket before me with no strings, I can maybe do it.
No. Listen, I've seen you play. You're good. You're a good player.
It's getting better slowly, but like all the racket stuff is also sometimes damaging me quite beyond. So like sometimes I'm so frustrated.
Yeah.
Just people don't realize that, like, because I also want to improve, but sometimes you bring, like, when you're testing stuff, and I also really want to give my audience like an unbiased, honest opinion, where I really give it a good go. I don't want to try it 5 minutes and then throw it away, or I try different string setups. I try to really understand the racket. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it takes time. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh my God, I need to get back to my own tennis. That's why, like yesterday when I played with Daniel without any testing involved, I was like, I was playing the best I've done in a while. So it was nice.
Right.
Feeling a bit back in business, but then we'll see.
But what is your best shot and worst shot? Like, I've heard you say sometimes you don't really like your backhand that much. Is that
my
true?
backhand is a constant work in progress. My slice is pretty decent. I would say that's, I think Daniel would agree with that, but that's, my forehand I'm pretty happy with overall.
Yeah.
Like I can serve decently for my height. But the backhand is usually what lets me down. So that's where I would need some coaching, especially. I need coaching with everything, but backhand.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but for a while, this is not so true now anymore because tennis technique has become so uniform. And then 80s, 90s, maybe even in the early 2000s, all the Swedish tennis players had weird forehands. I'm not talking about Borg. I'm not talking about Borg. I'm talking about after Borg.
Gustafsson, Larsson, those guys.
Absolutely,
I think.
Gustafsson, Larsson, Edberg, Söderlund.
Very strange.
There's a lot of weird forehands, long backswings, ugly looking. You know what I mean?
A bit like Gulbis style, like almost. Some of them have like it's
worse.
Odd,
in a lot of ways worse because Gulbis look kind of weird in the back, but look really clean in the front. Where these forehands look kind of weird the whole way through.
Yep.
So that's kind of a weird thing. From the Swedish players, but I'm glad that you're not part of that group because your forehand looks nice.
Yeah, my forehand is okay.
Yes.
And then it's just I have to get the Edberg inspiration on the backhand because he had a very good one on the back.
But I just want to mention this though, like doesn't mean that those forehands were bad necessarily. Like Söderlund had an absolute killer forehand. That forehand was absolute monster, right? So it looked a little weird, it looked somewhat flat to me, but it was despite the way it looked, it was a great forehand. And, even Edberg, I don't know if you watch old matches, but on Tennis Channel, they have a whole section where you can watch old matches. And I just recently watched Edberg Chang, French Open final.
That's a classic. I've seen that one. I saw that live. Not live. I watched on TV when I was a kid.
And I realized that Edberg was so close to win the French Open, which would have been unbelievable. But
I was a little bit heartbroken. I was a huge fan. I think this was 89, right?
Right.
89. Yeah, I was like 7 years old, so I remember that. I was a big tennis nerd already. I was at that age quite into it.
How old were you then in '89?
7.
And you already were a huge Edberg fan.
Yeah. I think let's say 82 I'm born. Yeah, so that's okay. 7. Yeah, so and I remember like being a little bit upset that he didn't win. I remember that.
Well, I can tell you this: that after looking at this match, I realize now that his forehand wasn't as bad as people make it out to be.
No.
It wasn't like Agassi forehand or a Becker forehand, but it wasn't that bad of a forehand. And simple logic, we were talking about Coco, would tell you that you can't have the career that Edberg's had with a amateur forehand. But if you read forums online, people make it out like Edberg had like a rec level forehand, which is it's ridiculous.
I mean, he did coach Roger for a few years, and they hit. Like, so do you think you can hit with Roger and give him a ball without the forehand? No chance, man.
No, absolutely not. Now, you talked about Gilbert today and his style.
Yeah.
People always talk about how bad Gilbert was. Like, if you want to go on YouTube and watch highlights from Gilbert against Becker, I think it was at Cincinnati. Gilbert was unreal. It was such an unbelievable player. Great strokes. Yeah, a little bit unorthodox. It's a little different. The way he walked and ran on the court was a little different. But his strokes weren't necessarily as beautiful as some other players. But he was an unbelievable player. So, yeah, I just want to say that, it's a perception, general perception, but the reality is sometimes different. And especially when we're talking about Edberg, who I love.
I
The
think there's
forehand
a
wasn't as bad.
no, and I think there's a little bit of a trend, or trend. I don't know. It's today's society. It's like people want to diss things from the past online, like they keyboard warriors who
Oh
are
my
never hit a forehand.
God.
They want to, like, I mean, even you had this Kyrgios Becker thing, like where Kyrgios kind of disrespecting Becker's accomplishments. And I mean, I like
Yes.
Kyrgios. Like I like his game. He's a bit of a off his head sometimes, but he seems like a nice guy genuinely when outside the court. When I met him briefly, but you can't go and say this the greats of the game. Like this is not really on. I don't think that's fair, right? It's not okay.
Jonas, you hit on the nail on the head. This is unbelievable the way you transition to this, because this is 100% something that is happening with the young generation. When I grew up, it was always like respect your elders,
Yeah, of course.
especially when we talk about tennis. You always respect older players. For one, they can probably still kick your butt, because when I went to college, I was a young guy, and my coach Mel Purcell, who was on tour, quarterfinalist in Wimbledon, 20 in the world, he was already in his mid 40s, and he was like, dude, we probably played like, let's just say if we play 100 sets, he probably won 70% of them. Like, he was beating me often. And I had ultimate respect for the guy. I would not say one bad word about his technique, and it was already a little bit classic than what you saw then in the early 2000s. The technique was already somewhat outdated, the way he was playing. But I wouldn't in a million years say that this guy sucks, because I had respect. But what I see now more than ever before is a general lack of respect towards the older generations on social media. But I'm also seeing it in tennis, and that's why I was so motivated to make a video about that Boris Becker and Kyrgios exchange, because the way Kyrgios was talking to Becker, the way he was communicating with him, complete lack of respect, and I thought it was uncalled for, and that's why I made that video. I did not like that, the way he was talking to him, because
I just think it makes, like, because I'm like, I'm not a curious apologist, because sometimes he gets, he loses his mind, and it's, I mean, but he seems like an okay guy off the off the court, and he goes on rants on social media, which some people do these days. But then, like, I think you just why do you do this? Like, there's no point. Like, you just hurt your own personal brand, right, by doing this, because he lost my respect. Yeah, to be honest, like, I really felt like, okay, I sometimes like, oh no, but I like Kyrgios. He's a cool guy, It's like, I like his game style. He brings people to the game. But that, even though Becker has done the shit with taxes, whatever, I don't care. I felt like you don't need to go in this like mind. Why do you like go and bash him? You have nothing to gain. There's zero gain. Like,
well,
I don't
first of all,
understand.
what he was saying too was not factual.
No,
He was saying that Becker was serving, if he was lucky, there were guys back then was serving 120. Becker was serving 141. Now you talk about like Shelton has a huge serve at 146. Becker was serving 141 with the
of
Stuza
course.
racket.
Yeah,
Jonas, remember that racket, the Stuza?
I have it.
Oh, you did? Of
Yeah, I have a
course.
Boris Becker. It's from the head factory. It's like it's in plastic.
Yeah.
It's that old. You meant the old like Puma racket, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I have it. I haven't even unwrapped the plastic. I would like to string it up. It's supposed to
All right.
be like a class. It's one of those limited edition. The only 5,000 made.
Imagine serving 141 with that racket. Are you joking
Yep.
me? Imagine
Great.
serving a 135 like Sampras with that, what is it, 85 square inch racket head?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wilson Pro Staff?
Yep.
Dude, like, that's like pretty close to impossible. So these guys were beasts. These were some of the greatest athletes to ever step foot on a tennis court.
Of course.
And people always say, like, tennis evolving, athletes are much better. Like, okay, so again, my favorite player of all time in basketball, Michael Jordan, he's absolutely considered the GOAT, best of all time, and he played basketball, what, 30 years ago, or longer than that, 40 years ago. So it's, look, it's true that sports evolve, but the best of the best back in the day, they were pretty spectacular when we're talking about tennis. Edberg, Becker, you know, Lendl, McEnroe, Connors. Like, these guys were spectacular. And like what Kyrgios did was just, it's something that's unheard of because, you know, if you want to talk about who made tennis, like who got tennis to the point where it's at now, where these guys are making so much money, you know, see, I'm from Croatia, but I moved to Germany because my dad was a tennis coach, and he first worked in Austria and then later on in Germany, which was in the mid 80s. And I always thought that that's where the tennis boom was. You know, the mid 80s when Becker won his first Wimbledon in 85, and then Graf came shortly
Huge.
after. And I thought that was the boom. My dad told me, listen, no. The actual boom in tennis was Borg and McEnroe. Those are the guys that exploded tennis. And then came the Beckers and the Stichs and the Edbergs, and then came the Sampras and the Agassi, and then came the Federer, the Murray, Nadal, Djokovic. So see, these guys built tennis to this level, and you have to thank and respect each generation prior for making this happen.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
just like I don't understand like this, like because I don't, because I think there's a disrespect. I mean, this is also in society in general, but like the world was different, equipment was different, people were different, they ate differently, but still, like, so you really should only compare people against other people from that generation.
Right.
And but even like looking at serve speeds and stuff, there's no way you can argue that these guys were not unbelievable athletes,
They were
exceptional tennis players. It's just like pointless argument for him. So
It's so stupid.
yeah,
Jonas, it's stupid to compare because we'll never know the answer. How
exactly.
would we? Because now when like Kyrgios play against Becker, because Becker can't move and he's old, it makes no sense. So you would have to imagine a young Becker against Kyrgios now, and that's just impossible. Like, and
Yeah,
then you
and
have
how
to
do you do it with the equipment? Like, do you get the same training
exactly.
equipment, the same
And so
food, the same
it's
everything?
just
You know?
really it's a really stupid discussion, and I really, that's something I never talk about. I avoid this like the plague. The only time I talked about this was when there was somebody that asked me, this is hilarious. This is a couple of years back. They asked me whether a 4.0 could beat a Grand Slam champion from the past, like a McEnroe or a Connors. And
What? How can you ask?
this led to the most disastrous period of time on intuitive tennis. This is a couple of years back, which led to me talking about this, and then this led to like this thing that I tried to do called Beat the Pro, and this just opened up a can of worms that I'm never going to open again. But this is the type of thoughts that people have. They think that if they're 4-0, they can beat like like John McEnroe. So yeah,
They can't
it's
beat,
good.
like, you can go back to the 1800s, the best player, then you're not going to beat that guy either. I mean, come on, like, this is ridiculous
I
stuff.
think we talked about this last time I was on, so we don't have to really talk about the like rec level versus pro level. It's something
No.
that's already been
It's a
done.
part of that,
But yeah,
that thing. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I think this is an interesting discussion, and it's fascinating. But I love the past, and I enjoy watching old matches just as much as I love watching the current ones. So that's just me.
Same. I can watch an old match. I can go a Federer Nadal match. I can go a Edberg
Yeah,
match.
yeah,
I think I don't go back. I mean, only for like research reasons, and I want to learn more about the game. But
yeah,
I tend to go like childhood heroes, like Edberg's era, because that's when I grew up watching tennis, and then I guess all these guys,
yeah.
big heroes for me. But I could easily also watch like a match from the 70s, if it's like
Dude,
interesting tennis,
I
because
just
I like the
watched.
sport.
Yeah, go ahead. I just watched
Just
Lendl McEnroe French Open final. I just watched that. That
good
was
match, I
cool.
guess.
Fantastic match. What a roller coaster. So I don't know. It's just great. But of course, like the more back in time you go, the slower it gets. No doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. So if you have the need for speed, the current form of tennis is going to bring you a lot of excitement. But I don't
Yeah,
find
I
that.
think there's also something to be said for like there's a point where it might get almost too fast. Like there's also an enjoyment in watching a little
Yes.
bit slower pace, because you
Well,
have more time to understand what they're manipulating the ball, and it's
yes.
just about power. So there's also a
Well,
point, I think.
Jonas, if you remember, we talked about style versus fundamentals a while back. That's definitely related to that, where not only do players' technique look identical in some cases or very similar, but it's also the way they play. And it's just a power baseline game with very little variety. And even Nadal said it's something that it's a shame that you don't see more variety. That's why Alcaraz is so great, because he does have some more variety. He likes to serve and volley. He likes to drop shot. He likes to mix it up a little bit. But a lot of other players don't. And if everybody plays like that, then I think tennis is going to suffer. I think ultimately it's more entertaining to watch different styles compete against each other. I think back in the day, watching a true baseliner against a true serve and volleyer was something that was so weird. It's like it was so interesting to see how let's say they played on clay, right? How is the serve and volleyer going to do against the baseliner on clay, and then vice versa? How is the baseliner going to do on a fast surface against the serve and volleyer? Like, it just created these interesting scenarios that you simply don't see that much anymore, where it's regardless of the surface, whether it's grass, hard court, or clay, it's pretty much the same thing. Like boom, 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 forehand, backhand, topspin, ripping, running, super high athleticism. It's pretty much that's what you see now,
Yeah,
unfortunately, and not
and
so much
it's
of the variety of play.
not always the easiest product. I broke my racket. Easiest product to sell, because
Yeah,
it does look a little bit two-dimensional, and you can have like these two amazing athletes, like a Russovori versus another baseline player who's
yeah,
very, very good, top 50 players, and it gets kind of like the same kind of rally. Like you see the same
yes,
points being played over and over. You go back, Fed Nadal, obviously the one reason they were extra interesting is that the contrast in style. Even Nadal said that recently. Like that is why that is a special rivalry,
true,
because they're so different. Even Djokovic Nadal, sometimes you can get bored with 48 shot rallies. It's like
yes,
it's so impressive that it gets boring. And going back, like Agassi, Sampras rushing to the net, Agassi
yes.
finding that like centimeter extra passing shot. That's a great entertainment. How can you not like
Oh,
that? It's
it's
best
fantastic.
part.
And I'm not saying that it's not entertaining now to watch tennis. It is, but it just looking ahead. Like, I'm very scared for tennis, for the future of tennis. I'm very, very worried. And this is what I ended 2023 with, like in a rant. And it has to do with just society and social media in general, where attention span is getting smaller and smaller. And therefore, like, what you see on social media is shortened formats, like under a minute highlights. And this is the type of tennis media that people are consuming. People are not watching tennis matches on TV anymore as often as they did in the past. Like, the young generation doesn't even watch TV. They don't watch TV at all. Of course, not everyone, but like the vast majority of them don't.
I
They're on
don't
their
watch TV,
phones.
so I
I
don't.
don't either, actually.
Yeah.
So, what's going to happen, I'm fearing, and what's already been happening, is that you see junior tournaments here now play sets up to 4. Super tiebreak is now super common. You see it everywhere, okay? Where they don't play out the third set. Best of 5 disappeared from the Master Series tournaments. I'm afraid that maybe they're going to get rid of best of 5 in Grand Slams. Maybe in the early rounds, and they're going to keep it in the later rounds. They're going to have to go with the public that's watching the tennis, because a lot of the people that are still watching tennis, which is a really old audience, if you look at the commercials that are run on the tennis channel, you notice some of those commercials. You're not in the United States, but it's like,
I know what you
I'm
mean,
not
though.
going to say, but it's like, it's one of those commercials where, help me, I fell and I can't get up type of commercial. Like, it's just for old people, because they know the audience is older.
Yeah.
So when this audience, God forbid, it's not there anymore one day, and now the younger audience starts going up there, I think everybody's going to have to go with what the viewing habits are, and I think tennis is going to get shortened. And when tennis gets shortened, you're not going to allow the best players to prove themselves, because where is it most difficult to beat Djokovic and Nadal? It's in a best out of 5 match. It is not easy to beat them in a best of three, but it's easier to get them out of in a best out of three than a best out of five. And if they get rid of that, like the greatest matches in the history of tennis that we all remember are all best of five matches. Whether it's Borg McEnroe in Wimbledon, whether it's Federer Nadal in Wimbledon, whether it's Djokovic Nadal at the US Open, or whatever Djokovic Federer Wimbledon, whatever you pick, like these classic battles, they're all best of fives. And I hope that that's going to stay with tennis, because it would be a shame if they got rid of that, if they shorten tennis.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need the storylines. I talked about this on the podcast before, but it's like a match is a story. If you don't leave room for a story to develop, what is it? It's just like a slug. Like if you do a tiebreak 10, there's no story in the tiebreak. I mean, he got 3-0 and then it comes back. It's not enough to really get a hold of, right? So I think that's a worry. And I also share the worry sometimes that the organizations in tennis, I feel like they're not, they're obviously trying their best, but I feel like there's too many organizations that it's just a little bit of a mess. You don't know what's happening with the tour from one year to the other. Now there's problems with the balls. All the players complain about injuries. So there's a lot of things that are happening in tennis now that you need to keep on top.
I agree. But like, I just want to add one more thing. Like, I do think that even with a short format, the best players will prevail. So if the format gets shortened to just play one set up to 6, I think you'll see the same guys at the top of the rankings, because this is going way back. There was a huge prize money tiebreak tournament here in Florida, and I played it, and there was a couple guys that were like with high ATP rankings, and every time they held this tournament, it was the same guys who were winning. So when you remember ATP doubles, when they used to play, best of 3, and then they switched to a super tiebreaker in the third, the Bryan brothers were number 1 with the old format, and they were number 1 with the new format. So I think even with a shorter format, you still see the best players at the top of the game. I will say that.
Yeah, it's just like probably a little bit less entertainment sometimes. I think if it goes too fast, right? That's for the viewer.
Yes, and I think that you not allowing the best players to show their true toughness and competitiveness and the difficulty of the other guys or girls beating them. That's what you're robbing them of, because like I said, there's nothing tougher than beating Federer, Nadal, Djokovic in a best out of 5 match. There's nothing tougher than that. And that's why there hasn't been that many other Grand Slam champions. Now, because I mentioned WTA, I'm definitely in favor of bringing back best of 5 for the WTA, because the WTA has horrendous marketing, and I had Eliza on my channel just like you did.
Yeah.
And she's great. Like, she went to Cancun and she was exposing the catastrophe that was this WTA finals tournament, but the marketing is awful, and it's done in such a way where the women are shown as inferior to the men. Like, it's okay for them to get coaching on the court and the coach come on the bench, but not for the ATP. Then, like, in Madrid, the female player gets a small cake and the male player gets a huge birthday cake. You saw this? Like, it's
it was
for some reason it's like they were shown as the inferior sport. They play the final on a Saturday, the men play the final on a Sunday. Now, some of this is also tennis tradition, but they need to do a better job marketing, and the women are highly capable of playing best out of 5. They're the best athletes that you've ever seen on WTA. And I'm not saying play the whole season best of 5, but why not just in the WTA finals make the final best of 5 like they used to do, or make the final
from quarters at least.
Yeah, or make the Grand Slam finals best of 5. You see unbelievable matches. And then how they always say like, oh, the women's final was like, even Kyrgios said this. The women's final was like, 3-0, and the men's final was 8-6 in the 5th or whatever, or 7-6 in the 5th or whatever it is. And then they say like how that's so unfair regarding the prize money and all that. So it's easy fix for WTA. Just make it best of 5. Then you don't get those like 45, 50-minute matches in the finals anymore, which, by the way, this can happen even in the men's. How can you control that somebody doesn't blow the other person out. Like happened to Nadal against Federer at the French in the semis. Federer got like I think 4 or 5 games or something like that. So
Final actually.
was it the final?
Hmm.
I thought it was the semis.
He got 4 games. Yeah, it was a depressing
Oh,
final for a Fed fan. It's
but
2008.
wasn't there a semis too where you got him in the wind?
No, but then in the win, but that was much later, I think. Yeah,
Much later. Yeah.
2008.
Okay.
The one he got 4 games was 2008. You know, not
got
that
it.
one
Okay.
Wimbledon after that.
one of my most beautiful memories. But yeah. Anyway, I think WTA can do a much better job with their marketing. You know.
I
And
agree,
we just have to see.
100%. I think that's a thing that they need to. I mean, they're getting in a new CEO, but then the same guy stays as the director. I'm not sure that's the way to go, but we'll see. But they need to do something because I feel like the WTA product is very good. The players are obviously very, very good athletes.
Yeah.
You can make it entertaining, but I think also you lack that storyline if you don't do 5 sets. I think I really feel like the 5 set. That's where I am most excited about tennis. I love a 5 set match. Like
Me too.
You can tune in and out of it if you don't have time. That's fine. But you have, even if you win the first 2 sets, even an Iga, who's like an unbelievable like athlete, might still have a down in the third, and that opens the match up. You know, so you bring that up. You know, it's a different thing. I think.
Very true. Very true. And one more thing I want to say about viewing habits, like. People often think that, you know, if it's a 5-6 hour match that you have to sit there for 5-6 hours. No, like, you know, like I think when people like are just kind of casually watching tennis and they see a match that's in the 5th set, they're gonna, you know, stick there and watch it.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna stick with it. And they might not watch the whole.
The best watching experience. Like I love it.
I think it is. I think it's great. Like that's like the ultimate thing. It's like the 15th round in boxing back in the day when they had that before they changed to 12 or whatever. Like it's the ultimate thing in tennis is a 5th set, the ultimate battle, and it's just fun to watch. And you don't have to watch the whole thing. Like, you know, you can be kind of in and out of it.
Yeah, 100%. All right, man. Last question for me. We've been doing it for a long time as we can. 600 calories per hour, you said. Is that what you burn from tennis? Is it the best way to burn calories?
You can. I think if you play with a lot of intensity, you can definitely burn 600 an hour for sure. I think it's one of the toughest sports. Of course, I think the activity that burns the most is swimming.
Yeah,
I think it's I don't know exact numbers, but I think swimming is by far what burns the most calories. But if you think about it, like if you play 3 sets, and these are tough sets, 3-hour match, that's a lot of calories that you're burning. 1,800 calories, that's a lot. You know, tennis is a tough sport.
Yeah, I agree. I think just a point for me that I've realized, like the more, if you play tennis, if you want to have a like injury-free or relatively injury-free, everybody gets injured, but is to do the side work, the warm-ups and the gym. Like for me, it's been a life change. I mean, I always did gym, but for a while I had a period when I did too much tennis and not enough gym, and it really hurt me. Like I think physically, I started getting like some pain in the foot. I started getting some knee problems. Now that I'm doing like 50-50 gym and tennis or something like that, it's much better. Like I can recommend to everyone, like actually put in the work to play tennis. You will play better as well. Like it's a different ballpark. Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
It's crucial to do like the before and after, you know, match prep and after the match, take care of yourself. So important.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to end on. All right, man. We'll talk soon again. We've been doing already 2.5 hours as usual.
How long was it? 2.5
hours.
Oh, you're gonna split it in 2 or just do 1?
I can. What do you think? I'm open to either.
I don't know, man. It's your channel, but I think maybe 1 will be better.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
don't know, but
people like you, so I think that's a good chance that they stay around for a longer one. You know, so
I don't really know podcasts. You're the pro there, but if I was a podcast consumer, if I was a podcast consumer, like which I am one, if there was a part 1 and 2, I generally don't like that. Like, just give me the whole thing. You know, if I'm going to watch half of it now, half of it later, I'll decide myself.
Exactly. You know? So I think that is generally the thing. Like, if it's there, you are in charge of like, okay, I can put 2 hours of my time. A lot of people listen to podcasts like I do when I string rackets or they do something passively, right? So or driving.
Are you string rackets yourself?
Yeah, it's a machine right here.
No way. What kind of machine you got?
Oh, a fancy one. I have a Head ET 3400. It's like the newest machine they have.
Oh wow,
very good.
Impressive. I need to stop by.
It's a Rolls-Royce.
Stop by your place, man.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Looks like you have a fun apartment.
Right.
It
I
looks
even
like you
have
got
like a 3-in-1 machine to measure swing weight and shit over there behind me.
Oh, wow. And how many rackets do you have total, you think?
Now I sold a bunch, so I maybe have 80 something, 90 maybe.
80?
Yeah,
Okay.
80, 90. I had more, but I sold a bunch. Going to get some space. My whole wardrobe behind is full of rackets. So, and my whole now bed is full, the guest bed is full of rackets. So I have to find a way, you know. But
I want to tell you something. Like racket storage is something that's tricky. Storing rackets.
very
So
tricky.
I saw one time, this was funny. We already talked about him. Robin Söderling
Yeah,
had rackets in his house, and they were on this weird contraption that was holding rackets, and there was tons of them. There must have been like 20 of them.
yeah.
I was like, I gotta get this somehow. I don't know what this is, but it's a beautiful thing that just holds racket, and the rackets are like the grip is sticking up. So I need to find something where I can store my rackets, where they're beautifully displayed. Because right now they're just in bags, and they're just like
Yeah,
I
same
like to have,
in bags.
yeah. I like to find out the solution to where these rackets can be nicely displayed and easily accessible. If you want to grab one to swing it or to show it to someone, that would be
Yeah.
my dream. So if you
My
stumble upon something like that, let me know.
yeah, we maybe have to invent something. I've been looking because like my
Okay.
my problem is that like it's just I want to try this, so I need to restring this, compare it, or someone asked me, can you bring the shift, the latest shift? I want to try it, the 1820,
Okay.
and then I sometimes have organized by bag, but it's like, okay, it's the bag. I have the bag stacked, so I have 8 tennis bags full of rackets, right? And
Yep.
then I have to go to the bottom bag. I have to drag out the whole wardrobe to get one racket in. So it's not
Oh
the
wow,
perfect solution, really. So I have to
that's
find a way.
tough.
But
That's tough. That's tough.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see for what I do. But yeah, it's a fun hobby, but it takes space.
Right. Well, thank you for having me on, Jonas. I appreciate it, man.
Same. I always enjoy it, and you're welcome to Marbella. We play some tennis. I'm happy to. Or if we see you somewhere around Germany, I'm gonna travel to some tournaments. That's the plan. We'll see which ones.
Yeah.
But it would be fun. It's always good. I think it's always good to go to live tournaments. It kind of ignites your love for tennis again. If you're just at home and watching tennis or playing on your normal courts,
Yeah.
I love just going on some travel. Right, it's fun.
It's fun. It's really fun. Yeah. It adds a whole nother thing to it. Yeah, it's fun.
Exactly, it adds extra. I recommend anyone that has a chance, like at least to watch like one live match. It makes tennis completely different than watching on the TV. It's like this.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Absolutely.
Much better pace. All right, man. Well, we
Jonas,
keep in touch.
keep in
Thanks
touch,
for joining.
man. I'm wishing you the best of luck in 2024. You keep killing it, okay?
Same.
All right, man.
All right.
You take care. All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.